Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this one, if you're new here, this is a what-if series where we take Naruto's story and bend it in a direction canon never dared to go. Today's bend? What if the blood of a lost nation had been sleeping inside Naruto Uzumaki this entire time, waiting for the one moment his life hung by a thread to wake up? Buckle in. This is the story of the day Naruto stopped being just the container of a fox, and started becoming something the shinobi world hadn't seen in decades. Let's get into it. The mist over the bridge was thick enough to taste. Not the gentle kind of mist that rolled in off calm water at dawn. This was something colder. Something that clung to the back of the throat and made every breath feel like swallowing a knife. Team 7 stood in the middle of the half-finished bridge, planks still raw and pale from the saw, the skeleton of Tazuna's dream stretching out toward a shoreline that suddenly felt very far away. Kakashi Hataki's single visible eye tracked the mist with the flat calm of a man who had already guessed what was coming. Sasuke Uchiha stood with his weight balanced and his kunai loose in his fingers, jaw tight. Sakura Haruno had positioned herself in front of Tazuna, protecting the old bridge builder with a kunai that trembled just slightly in her grip. Trembled, but didn't drop. And Naruto Uzumaki stood at the front, grinning like an idiot, because that was what Naruto did when he was terrified. He grinned bigger. "You feel that, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto said, voice too loud for the quiet. "That's Zabuza's chakra, right? I can feel it crawling on my skin." "It's not just Zabuza," Kakashi said quietly. As if summoned by the words, the mist folded inward on itself, and there he was. Zabuza Momochi, wrapped bandages over the lower half of his face, the massive cleaver of a blade resting easy over one shoulder like it weighed nothing at all. Beside him, a slighter figure in a mask patterned like porcelain, still and silent as a held breath. "Kakashi of the Sharingan," Zabuza rasped. "You brought children to my grave. They're not going to be the ones digging it," Kakashi answered, and pulled his headband up off his left eye. What followed happened fast, the way real fights always do, faster than the mind wants to process, faster than fear has time to properly land. Zabuza came in like a landslide given a body, that enormous blade carving a horizontal arc that should have cut Kakashi in half if Kakashi hadn't already moved. Sasuke peeled off toward the masked figure at a nod from his sensei. Sakura held her ground in front of Tazuna, teeth gritted, watching for any opening in the mist that might mean a clone was circling behind them. And Naruto did the thing Naruto always did. He threw himself directly into the part of the fight that was most obviously going to get him killed. "Sasuke! I got your back!" he shouted, sprinting toward the masked ninja, kunai raised. If you've watched the original story, you already know how this is supposed to go. Sasuke and the boy in the mask trade blows across the frozen mirrors of the crystal ice mirrors technique, Haku's technique, though nobody knows the name yet, and Naruto gets himself trapped right alongside his rival, and the two of them nearly die together in a hailstorm of Saban needles. That's canon. This is not canon. Because this time, when Naruto skidded to a stop at Sasuke's side and the mist solidified into a dome of ice, countless mirror flat panels rising up around them like a cage built from frozen glass, something in the air changed. Subtle. Nobody in the fight noticed it yet. But if you'd been standing close enough, you might have felt a strange pressure in your chest, like static before a lightning strike. "What is this?" Sasuke muttered, back to back with Naruto now. Kunai raised as reflections of the masked figure bloomed into every panel of ice at once. Dozens of identical silhouettes. Impossible to tell which one was real. "Ice mirrors," came the voice, soft, almost apologetic, from everywhere and nowhere. "I don't want to kill you. But my precious person's dream matters more than your lives." "Precious person, huh?" Naruto said, forcing the grin back onto his face even as sweat ran down his temple. "That's Zabuza, isn't it? You're doing all this for him?" There was a pause in the mirrors. Just long enough to notice. "Yes." "Then I get it," Naruto said, and for a second, just a second, the grin faded into something more honest. "But that doesn't mean I'm gonna let you hurt my friend." The first volley of Saban came a heartbeat later, and it came from every direction at once, an impossible storm of thin silver needles converging on two boys trapped in the center of a cage of ice. Sasuke's Sharingan flared red, tracking motion that should have been too fast to track, but even his eyes could only follow so much at once. Some of you already know how this scene goes in canon. Sasuke takes needle after needle for Naruto, collapses, and it's Naruto's grief that becomes the catalyst for the fox's chakra bursting out for the first time. That's the story you know. Watch closely though, because in this version, something else happens first. As the Senbon storm closed in, Naruto's instincts screamed at him in a language older than words. Not the fox's chakra. That low, red, boiling thing at the very back of his mind stayed dormant, untouched, unnoticed. This was something else. Something that felt less like heat and more like the deep cold of ocean water, less like rage and more like an old, patient weight settling into his bones. His hands moved before his mind caught up, and where there should have been nothing but flesh and blood standing between Sasuke and 100 Senbon needles, something answered instead. Chains. Not the golden chakra chains some of you might already associate with the Uzumaki clan from later parts of the story. No, these were different. Darker. Heavier. They didn't glow so much as they seemed to drink the light around them. Dense metal-bright links erupting from Naruto's back and shoulders in a fan of motion too fast for the eye to properly track, weaving into a lattice in the space of a single heartbeat. The Senbon storm hit that lattice, and stopped. Every single needle. Every one of the dozens raining down from every angle. They struck chain after chain and simply could not pass, deflected, snapped, or caught outright between interlocking links that clanged together with a sound like a temple bell being struck underwater. Silence for one suspended second. Then the ice mirrors, every single one of them, dozens of perfect reflective panels, cracked from top to bottom in a spiderweb of fractures and shattered outward in a glittering rain. Sasuke stared. Blood ran cold in his veins for an entirely different reason than the Senbon had given him. Naruto, he said slowly, what did you just do? Naruto didn't answer. He couldn't. He was staring at his own hands, at the chains still hanging in the air around him, thick as a grown man's wrist, forged from something that looked like living metal and moved like it had a will of its own, and he had absolutely no idea what any of it meant. If you've been enjoying this ride so far, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because trust me, this story only gets bigger from here. Naruto has no clue what just happened to him. But somebody watching from the edge of the bridge absolutely does. Kakashi's fight with Zabuza froze mid-motion. The Sharingan user's single crimson eye had been locked entirely on his opponent's blade, tracking the water clones that kept dissolving and reforming around him in the mist. But the sound of shattering ice and the sudden, unmistakable clang of forged metal yanked his attention sideways for exactly the length of a blink. What Kakashi saw in that blink made his blood run several degrees colder than the mist already had. Chains. Dense, dark, unnaturally solid chakra chains, hanging in a defensive lattice around two 12-year-old boys, having just obliterated an A-rank ice technique like it was made of sugar glass. That's not the fox's chakra, Kakashi thought, even as he threw himself sideways to avoid a diagonal slash from Zabuza's blade that would have opened him from shoulder to hip. That's not red. That's not boiling. That's... He didn't get to finish the thought. Zabuza pressed the advantage of his split attention immediately, driving him back across the bridge planks with a series of brutal, telegraphed only a half-second in advance strikes that demanded every scrap of Kakashi's focus just to survive. But some part of his mind, the part trained by years of reading historical mission scrolls in the Hokage's archive, of studying the old wars, of memorizing the fallen villages that had once stood as pillars of the shinobi world before they were erased, that part of his mind was already spinning through possibilities, cross-referencing what he'd just seen against something buried deep in memory. Chains like that, Kakashi thought grimly, deflecting another slash with a kunai that groaned under the impact. I've only ever read about in one place. But there was no time to chase the thought further. Zabuza was already moving into the next phase of his assault, and if Kakashi didn't focus completely, none of them were walking off this bridge. Back inside what remained of the shattered ice dome, Naruto was still staring at his own hands. The chains hadn't vanished. They hung suspended around him and Sasuke in a loose, protective ring, faint wisps of dark chakra curling off each link like steam off a hot spring, and when Naruto flexed his fingers, he felt an answering shudder ripple down every chain at once, like they were an extension of his own arm, a limb he'd never known he had. Whoa, he breathed. Whoa, 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 did I do that? I did that, right? You'd better hope you did, Sasuke said, voice tight, because if you didn't, we have a much bigger problem. From what was left of the broken mirrors, most of the ice had shattered, but a few panels remained intact around the perimeter. The masked figure stepped back into view, dropping down from one surviving shard of ice onto the bridge planks with barely a sound. The porcelain mask tilted, unreadable, studying Naruto with what might have been surprise, if a mask could convey surprise at all. I've never seen a technique like that, the masked ninja said quietly. What are you? Naruto said, still flexing his chain-wrapped fingers like he was testing whether they were real. Kind of a good question, actually? I have no idea. It should have been a strange thing to admit in the middle of a fight. It should have made him look weak, uncertain, an easy target for a killing blow. But something about the honesty of it, the wide-eyed, almost giddy confusion on Naruto's face even as chains thick as tree roots hung coiled around him, made Haku pause. That pause cost precious seconds. Seconds that, in another version of this story, might never have existed at all. Sasuke, Naruto said suddenly, an idea sparking behind his eyes, get back. I want to try something. Try what exactly? You don't even know what that is. Yeah, well, Naruto said, and the old reckless grin came back in full force. Guess we're both gonna find out. He thrust both palms forward. The chains answered instantly, snapping forward through the air like living whips, faster than the Senban storm had been, faster than anything Naruto had ever moved before in his life. Haku's eyes, the only visible part of the masked face, widened behind the porcelain, and the boy vanished into the last remaining ice mirror with the speed of someone who had trained their entire life to survive exactly this kind of moment. The chains struck the mirror instead of the body they'd been aimed at, and the ice, already weakened from the earlier shattering, could not survive a second impact. It burst apart in a shower of glittering fragments, and this time, there was no mirror left standing at all. The dome of ice was gone entirely, leaving only bare, mist-wrapped bridge planks and two shell-shocked genin standing in the wreckage. Haku reappeared several meters back, breathing hard, mask cracked along one cheek from a stray fragment of his own shattered technique. That power, Haku said slowly, where does it come from? Naruto opened his mouth to say I have no idea for the second time, and that was when the chains, all at once, without warning, simply stopped. They didn't fade gracefully. They didn't retract in some elegant unwinding motion. They simply lost cohesion mid-air, shattering into motes of dark chakra that dissolved into nothing, and the moment they vanished, Naruto's knees buckled. Naruto! Sasuke caught him before he hit the planks, one arm hooked under his shoulders, and up close he could feel how badly his teammate was shaking, how cold his skin had gone, how his breathing came in short, ragged gasps like he'd just run 20 miles without stopping. I'm fine, Naruto mumbled, though his eyes had gone unfocused, staring somewhere past Sasuke's shoulder at nothing at all. Just, really tired all of a sudden. Weird. Weird was an understatement. Whatever those chains had cost him, it hadn't come out of the same well that fueled his usual reckless bursts of energy. This was a different kind of exhaustion, deeper, colder, the kind that made a person's very bones feel hollowed out. Haku watched this exchange with something that looked, for just a moment, almost like pity. You don't even understand your own power, Haku said quietly. That's dangerous. For you, more than for me. Yeah? Naruto managed, forcing himself to straighten up out of Sasuke's grip through sheer stubbornness, legs wobbling only a little. Well, dangerous or not, it's still gonna be enough to make sure you don't hurt anybody else today. There's something worth pointing out here, if you're paying close attention. In the original story, this is the moment Naruto's spirit breaks just enough for the fox's chakra to answer. Here, the fox never gets the chance. Whatever just woke up inside Naruto answered the call first, and it answered so completely, so decisively, that something ancient and red at the very back of his mind didn't even stir. Make sure you're subscribed, because that detail is going to matter a whole lot more than you think, several chapters down the line. The fight that followed was shorter than it might have been in another telling, not because the danger evaporated, but because Haku, shaken by what he'd witnessed, and increasingly torn about the mission itself, found his resolve fracturing in ways his mask couldn't fully hide. When word reached him, through some shift in the mist, some old bond of loyalty he couldn't ignore, that Zabuza's fight against Kakashi had turned dire, Haku made the choice that always defined him in every version of this story. He chose his precious person over his own life. He moved to intercept a blade meant for Zabuza, took the hit meant to end his mentor's life, and fell. Naruto watched it happen from several dozen meters away, still catching his breath, still trying to process the fact that solid chains of chakra had exploded out of his own back less than 10 minutes earlier, and something in his chest twisted painfully at the sight of a boy his own age, crumpling to the bridge planks in a spreading stain of red. "Hey!" Naruto shouted, staggering forward despite Sasuke's hand grabbing for his sleeve. "Hey, don't!" He didn't have to. He didn't finish the sentence. There wasn't a version of it that made sense to say out loud. Zabuza, staring down at the fallen boy who had once called him a precious person, went through something that looked, for the first time, like real grief cracking through years of hardened cynicism. Kakashi, breathing hard, lowered his kunai but didn't fully relax his stance. And then Gato arrived, the businessman behind the entire contract, flanked by a small army of thugs, sneering down at the exhausted shinobi like they were nothing but disappointing hired help who'd failed to earn their pay. "Look at this pathetic scene," Gato said, swirling a cup of amber juice he'd brought along like he was toasting a business deal rather than watching a boy bleed out on cold wooden planks. "I never intended to pay either of you criminals anyway. Kill each other for all I care. My men will finish whoever's left." Zabuza's expression, beneath the bandages, went very still. What followed was less a battle and more a reckoning. Zabuza, driven by fury and grief in equal measure, cutting through Gato's hired thugs with a ferocity that made even Kakashi step back and let him work, ending the businessman's schemes permanently before his own body finally gave out from the wounds he'd taken. Naruto, kneeling at Haku's side through all of it, felt something settle heavily in his chest, a lesson about precious people and the price paid for them that he wouldn't fully understand the weight of for a long time yet. That night, back at Tazuna's house, with the bridge builder's family fussing over tea and rice and the quiet, grateful sounds of a village that finally believed it might survive, Kakashi found Naruto sitting alone on the porch steps, staring up at a sky finally clear of mist. "You've been quiet," Kakashi said, settling down beside him. "Been thinking," Naruto admitted. "About the chains?" Naruto's head snapped around, eyes wide. "You saw that?" "Hard to miss," Kakashi said dryly. "Chains thick as my arm, shattering an A-rank ice technique in a single strike. That's not something a person forgets." Naruto looked back down at his own hands, flexing his fingers slowly, like he half expected the chains to answer again on command. "They didn't. I don't know what happened," he admitted quietly. "One second I'm about to get turned into a human pincushion, and the next there's just chains everywhere. And after they disappeared I felt like somebody drained every drop of energy out of me at once. Worse than after training with you. Worse than anything." Kakashi was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars instead of his student. "Naruto," he said finally, "what do you know about your mother's clan?" The question caught Naruto completely off guard. Huh? Nothing. I don't even know who my parents were." "You know that?" "Right," Kakashi said, and something in his tone made it clear this was a conversation he'd been half dreading and half preparing for since the moment he'd seen those chains erupt across the bridge. "There's something I need to look into, once we're back in Konoha. Something about an old clan, and an old village, that might explain what just happened to you tonight." "Wait, what village? What clan?" "Kakashi-sensei, you can't just say something like that and then." "I need to be sure first," Kakashi said, standing, resting a hand briefly on Naruto's shoulder in a rare gesture of gravity. "Before I tell you something this big, I need to be certain it's true. Get some rest. You earned it today." He left Naruto sitting alone on the porch steps, staring up at a clear night sky, turning a single word over and over in his mind that Kakashi hadn't even said out loud yet, but that somehow felt like it was already hanging in the air between them. Clan. Naruto had never had one of those. Not really. Not one he could name. Tonight, for the first time in his life, that felt like it might be about to change, and he had absolutely no idea whether that change was going to be the best thing that had ever happened to him, or something far more dangerous than he was ready for. The road back to Konoha felt longer than the road out had been. Maybe it was the exhaustion still lingering in everyone's bones after the fight on the bridge. Maybe it was the strange, unspoken tension that had settled over the team ever since Kakashi's quiet question on Tazuna's porch. Whatever the reason, Team 7 walked the dirt road home mostly in silence, broken only by Sakura's occasional attempts at conversation and Naruto's uncharacteristic quiet in response. "You've barely said a word since Wave," Sakura said finally, falling into step beside him. "Are you feeling okay? That thing with the chains looked like it really wore you out." "I'm fine," Naruto said, the same thing he told Sasuke on the bridge, and it was about as convincing now as it had been then. "Just thinking, Naruto. Thinking. Those two words don't usually go together. Hey!" Despite himself, Sakura's teasing pulled a small, genuine laugh out of him, the first real one since the mist had cleared over that bridge. But it faded quickly, replaced by the same distracted, faraway look that had been etched on his face for the entire walk home. Ahead of them, Kakashi walked with his hands in his pockets, orange book notably absent from his grip for once, his single visible eye fixed on the road with the kind of intensity that suggested his mind was somewhere very far from the dusty path beneath his sandals. He was thinking about archives. Old scrolls. A name he hadn't spoken out loud in years, one that had been quietly erased from most of the standard shinobi curriculum for reasons that had never fully sat right with him. Yuzushio-gakure. The village hidden in the whirling tides. He needed to be sure. And there was only one place in the entire land of fire where he was going to find the kind of confirmation this deserved. A small, restricted archive room buried 3 floors beneath the Hokage's tower, accessible only with direct clearance from the Hokage himself. They reached the village gates by late afternoon, the familiar sight of Konoha's walls pulling a visible wave of relief through the whole team. Tazuna's Bridge, now officially named the Great Naruto Bridge, in an honor Naruto still hadn't fully processed, had been left behind, along with a village that would remember them for generations. But Kakashi didn't let the team disperse right away. "Sasuke, Sakura, go home, get some proper rest. You've earned it," he said. "Naruto, I need you to come with me." "Huh? Why just me?" "Because I have a promise to keep," Kakashi said simply, "about a conversation we started on a porch a few nights ago." That got Naruto's full attention immediately, the exhaustion of the long walk evaporating in an instant. "The clan thing? You're gonna tell me now?" "I'm going to try to find out now," Kakashi corrected. "There's a difference." "Come on." The Hokage's tower rose ahead of them, familiar and solid against the darkening sky, and Kakashi led Naruto not toward the mission desk or the usual reporting room, but down a narrow side stairwell that Naruto had genuinely never noticed before in all his years of visiting this building to badger the old man for missions. "Where does this even go?" Naruto asked, following him down stone steps that grew progressively cooler and more shadowed the further they descended. "Someplace most genin never see," Kakashi said. "Someplace most jonin never see, honestly." At the bottom of the stairs stood a heavy door, reinforced with old ceiling tags along every edge, glowing faintly with chakra that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Kakashi pressed his palm flat against the center of the door, channeling a thread of chakra through it, and the tags flickered, recognized something in his signature, and the door swung open with a groan of old hinges. Beyond it, rows and rows of shelves stretching back further than the torchlight could properly illuminate, packed with scrolls yellowed by age, some bound in cracked leather, others sealed in glass cases that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades. "Whoa," Naruto breathed, stepping inside. "What is this place?" "The restricted archive," Kakashi said. "Records the village doesn't teach in the academy. Records about clans that don't exist anymore, villages that were wiped off the map, techniques too dangerous or too politically complicated to let genin stumble across by accident. And you think something about my mom's clan is down here?" "I think," Kakashi said carefully, moving between the shelves with the ease of a man who had clearly been here before, "that what happened on that bridge wasn't something a person can just learn. That kind of chakra manifestation, chains, forming a defensive lattice, hard enough to shatter high-rank ice techniques on contact, that's not a jutsu. That's a bloodline trait, and I've only ever read about one clan capable of something like it." He stopped in front of a shelf near the very back of the room, running his fingers along a row of sealed scroll cases until he found the one he was looking for, an old, dust-covered case marked with a spiral crest that made something in Naruto's chest tighten the moment he saw it, though he couldn't have said why. There, Kakashi said quietly. That symbol. Do you recognize it? Naruto stared at the spiral, something tugging at the very edge of his memory. Isn't that the symbol on the back of my jacket? The one old man Hokage gave me when I graduated? It is, Kakashi confirmed. It's the crest of Uzumaki, the village hidden in the whirling tides. I've literally never heard of that place. Most people your age haven't, Kakashi said. That's rather the point. He carefully broke the seal on the case and unrolled the scroll inside across a nearby reading table, the parchment crackling with age, the ink faded but still legible in careful, formal brushstrokes. Sit down, Naruto, Kakashi said. This is going to take a while to explain. If you're new to the lore side of Naruto's world and you've never heard of Uzumaki either, don't worry, you're in good company, because in the actual story, this entire history barely gets a passing mention. Here, though, we're going to dig all the way in, because it matters more than you think. A long time ago, Kakashi began, before the era of the 5 great nations that you know today, there was a 6th village that stood as an equal to them. Uzumaki, the village hidden in the whirling tides, home of the Uzumaki clan. The Uzumaki clan, Naruto repeated slowly. Like my mom's clan? Exactly like your mom's clan, Kakashi said. Your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, was one of the last known survivors of that village. Naruto sat frozen, hands flat on the table, staring at the scroll like it might rearrange itself into something less overwhelming if he looked hard enough. The Uzumaki were known throughout the shinobi world for 2 things, Kakashi continued. Extraordinary chakra reserves. Reserves so massive that a single Uzumaki could often outendure entire squads of ordinary shinobi, and an unmatched mastery of sealing techniques. Fuinjutsu, at a level other villages could never quite replicate. Okay, Naruto said. I mean, I kinda knew Mom was supposed to be really strong. But what's that got to do with the chains? With what happened on the bridge? Kakashi tapped a specific passage on the scroll, a section of text surrounded by a faded illustration, a diagram of a human figure with chains extending from the back, rendered in careful, old-fashioned ink. This, he said. This is what I needed to confirm before I said anything to you. There's a rare trait within the Uzumaki bloodline, rarer even than the clan's typical chakra reserves, sometimes called the adamantine sealing chains. Chains of pure, condensed chakra, hard enough to bind or destroy nearly anything they strike, traditionally used both in combat and in sealing techniques so absolute that other nations feared them. Adamantine, Naruto repeated slowly, testing the unfamiliar word. Hold on, that's exactly what I did on the bridge. That's exactly what happened. I believe it is, Kakashi said. Though from what I've read, and from what I saw on that bridge, what happened to you goes beyond what most ordinary Uzumaki with this trait could produce. The scroll describes the chains typically manifesting only under extreme need, moments of intense emotion, moments of mortal danger, and even then, usually only a handful of chains at a time, enough to bind a single target. I don't even know how many. Like a whole wall of them. All at once. You did, Kakashi confirmed, and there was something careful in his voice now, something that made Naruto's stomach twist with a fresh kind of worry. Which brings me to the part of this scroll I need you to listen to very seriously. He turned to the next section of the parchment, where the elegant brushstrokes grew tighter, more urgent, as though the original author had been writing about something they considered genuinely dangerous. There's a further, rarer manifestation described here, Kakashi said, referred to in the old records as the Adamantine Chakra Mode. Not just chains summoned in a moment of need, but a full transformation, a hardened shroud of chakra fused with the chain technique, granting the user immense durability and offensive power far beyond the baseline trait. According to this scroll, it was considered the mark of Uzumaki royal bloodline specifically, a trait that skipped generations, appearing rarely and unpredictably, even within the Uzumaki clan itself. Naruto sat in silence for a long moment, processing that. Royal bloodline, he finally repeated. Kakashi-sensei, are you telling me I'm some kind of, I don't know, prince of a village that doesn't even exist anymore? I'm telling you, Kakashi said carefully, that your mother came from a lost nation with a very particular, very dangerous legacy, and that legacy appears to have just woken up inside you on a bridge in the land of waves. Whether that makes you a prince is a question for a different conversation entirely. Okay, but why now? Why didn't this happen before? I've been in plenty of dangerous situations. Why'd it wait until wave? Kakashi was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. The scroll suggests the mode typically requires two things to manifest, he said finally. A moment of genuine, mortal danger, the kind where the body and chakra network believe death is truly imminent, not merely likely, and an emotional catalyst strong enough to override the body's normal restraint. On that bridge, protecting Sasuke from something you had no way of blocking through conventional means. That may have been the first time both conditions were fully met at once. Naruto thought back to that moment, the ice mirrors closing in, the Senbon storm descending from every direction, the absolute certainty that this was it, that there was no way both of them were walking away from that dome of ice. He remembered, very clearly, the moment his mind hadn't been thinking about himself at all, only about the idea that Sasuke might die because Naruto hadn't been fast enough, strong enough, in general. Huh, he said quietly. Yeah, that tracks actually. There's more, Kakashi said, and something in his tone made Naruto brace himself before the words even came. And this part, I need you to take very seriously, Naruto. More seriously than almost anything I've ever told you. Okay. Kakashi turned to the final section of the scroll, where the ink grew even tighter, more cramped, as though whoever had written this passage had been rushing to fit an urgent warning into limited space. According to these records, Kakashi said slowly, the Adamantine Chakra Mode does not draw solely on chakra reserves, the way most techniques do. It draws, in part, directly on the user's life force. Repeated or prolonged use, without proper training and control, is described here as capable of significantly shortening the user's lifespan. The words hung in the air between them like a physical weight. Naruto stared down at his own hands again, the same hands that had summoned chains thick as tree trunks less than 3 days ago, the same hands that had felt, in the aftermath, hollowed out in a way that had nothing to do with ordinary chakra exhaustion. That's why I felt like that, he said quietly. After. Like somebody drained something out of me that wasn't just chakra. That would be my guess, yes, Kakashi said, and for once, there was no lightness in his voice at all, no teasing edge, nothing but grave, unfiltered concern. Which is why this cannot become something you experiment with recklessly, Naruto. I understand, better than most people, honestly, how much you want to grow stronger, how much you want to prove yourself, but this is not a power you can afford to force. Not until we understand it properly. Not until we find a way to make sure using it doesn't cost you years of your life every time you do. Naruto swallowed hard, and for the first time since the conversation started, some of the excitement that had been building underneath his shock gave way to something heavier, more sober. Okay, he said quietly. I hear you. I'm not trying to get myself killed over some cool new power, believe it. Good, Kakashi said, some of the tension easing out of his shoulders. Because I intend to help you learn to control this, Naruto. Properly, carefully, and safely. But I needed you to understand the stakes before we started, and I needed to be certain of what this was before I said a single word to you about it. I don't take chances with your life, not after everything your parents. He stopped himself abruptly, the sentence cutting off mid-breath. Naruto's head snapped up. Wait, my parents? Kakashi-sensei, you said parents, not just my mom. Do you? That's a conversation for another day, Kakashi said, a little too quickly, rolling the scroll back up with careful, deliberate motions that made it very clear the topic was closed for now. One revelation at a time, Naruto. Trust me. Naruto looked like he very much wanted to argue that point, but something in Kakashi's expression, a rare, unguarded flash of old grief that vanished as quickly as it appeared, made him bite back the protest. Fine, he said instead. But you owe me, sensei. Big time. Noted, Kakashi said, the ghost of a smile finally returning. Now come on. There's someone else who needs to know about this before we go any further. The third Hokage's office was quiet at this hour, lit only by a single lamp on the desk and the last orange light of sunset bleeding through the tall windows behind him. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked up from a stack of paperwork as Kakashi and Naruto entered. his expression shifting immediately from mild curiosity to something far more focused the moment he saw the old scroll case tucked under Kakashi's arm. "Kakashi," he said slowly, "I take it this isn't a social visit." "No, Lord Hokage," Kakashi said. "Something happened on the wave mission that I believe requires your attention, and I believe you already have some idea what it might be, given the archive I just pulled it from." Hiruzen's eyes moved to Naruto, taking in the boy's unusually serious expression, and something old and heavy settled over his features. "Sit down, both of you," he said quietly. "I suspect this is going to be a longer conversation than either of you are expecting." Naruto and Kakashi took the offered seats, and Hiruzen set his pipe aside, untouched, unlit, folding his hands on the desk in front of him. "Tell me what happened," he said. "All of it." Kakashi gave a clipped, precise account of the events on the bridge. The ice mirrors, the Saban storm, the sudden eruption of chains that shattered an A-rank technique in a single strike, Naruto's subsequent exhaustion afterward. Hiruzen listened without interrupting, his expression growing steadily graver with every detail, until by the time Kakashi finished, the old Hokage looked, for a brief moment, every one of his considerable years. "I had wondered," he said finally, "whether this day might come eventually. I had simply hoped it wouldn't come quite so soon." "You knew about this?" Naruto asked. "About the chain thing? The adamantine whatever?" "I knew of the possibility," Hiruzen said carefully. "Your mother, Naruto, was tested for this exact trait when she was young, before she ever came to this village. The results, at the time, were inconclusive, some indication of latent potential, but nothing that ever manifested during her lifetime that I witnessed personally. I had hoped, honestly, that whatever dormant potential existed in her bloodline might have simply passed you by entirely, sparing you both the power and its considerable costs. But it didn't," Naruto said quietly. "It's in me." "It woke up." "So it would seem," Hiruzen agreed, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. "Naruto, I need you to understand something important about the history you've just been told. Uzumaki was not destroyed by accident, or by simple misfortune. It was destroyed deliberately, by a coalition of other nations, specifically because its shinobi, and its unique bloodline abilities, including the one you appear to carry, were considered too dangerous, too much of a threat to the existing balance of power, to be allowed to continue existing." Naruto felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Wait, you're saying people destroyed an entire village because they were scared of stuff like what I did on the bridge?" "In part, yes," Hiruzen said gravely. "The Uzumaki clan's sealing techniques alone were formidable enough to draw envy and fear from rival nations. Combine that with a rare bloodline capable of producing warriors like the ones described in the old records, warriors wrapped in nearly indestructible chakra, wielding chains capable of binding or destroying almost anything they touched, and you begin to understand why an alliance formed specifically to end that village's existence before it grew any stronger." The weight of that history settled over the room like a physical presence. Naruto sat very still, processing the idea that the power now living inside his own body had, once upon a time, been considered dangerous enough to justify wiping an entire nation off the map. "This is why," Hiruzen continued, "I must ask you to exercise extreme caution and discretion, Naruto. What happened on that bridge was witnessed only by your own team, and by the two enemy shinobi you fought, one of whom did not survive the encounter, and the other of whom, from Kakashi's report, appears to have shown no interest in reporting what he witnessed to anyone. That means, as of right now, this village remains one of the very few places in the world aware that this bloodline has resurfaced. I intend to keep it that way for as long as possible, both for the safety of this village, and for your own safety most of all." "You think people would come after me for this?" Naruto said slowly. "It wasn't really a question." "I know they would," Hiruzen said simply. "There are those in this world who would see a living inheritor of Uzumaki power as either a prize to be captured, or a threat to be eliminated before it can grow. Possibly both, depending on who found out first. This is not a fear I raise lightly, Naruto. It is a certainty, based on history that has already played out once before." Naruto swallowed hard, the full weight of what he'd unknowingly stepped into finally beginning to settle properly across his shoulders. "Okay," he said quietly. "So what do I do? I can't just pretend it didn't happen. It's in me." What if it happens again and I can't control it? That, Hiruzen said, something gentler entering his tone now, is precisely why Kakashi brought this to me tonight, rather than simply handling it alone. Naruto, I intend to authorize proper training in this. Careful, controlled, supervised training, designed to help you understand and eventually master this ability, rather than being controlled by it. This will not happen overnight. It will require patience, discipline, and considerable trust in the people guiding you through it. I can do patience, Naruto said immediately, with the kind of stubborn confidence that made both Kakashi and Hiruzen exchange a brief, knowing look. We shall see, Hiruzen said, not unkindly, the ghost of an old smile finally crossing his weathered features. Kakashi, I want you to continue overseeing Naruto's general training as before, but I will also be arranging additional resources, including, I believe, a certain individual currently traveling outside the village who has considerable personal history with the Uzumaki clan, and who may prove invaluable in helping Naruto navigate what's ahead. Naruto's ears perked up immediately. Wait, who? Somebody who knew my mom's clan? Are they gonna teach me stuff about the chains? Patience, Naruto, Hiruzen said, amusement flickering openly now. All in good time. For tonight, I want you to rest, and I want you to think carefully about everything you've heard in this room. This is a heavier burden than most 12-year-olds are ever asked to carry. I have every confidence you can bear it, but I want you to bear it wisely, not recklessly. Yeah, Naruto said quietly, the earlier bravado softening into something more thoughtful. I get it, old man. I'll be careful. Believe it. Later that night, walking home alone through streets lit by the soft orange glow of lanterns, Naruto found himself staring up at the darkening sky, turning the day's revelations over and over in his mind like stones being worn smooth by a river. A lost village. A royal bloodline. A power capable of shattering an A-rank technique in a single strike, and a power dangerous enough that entire nations had once banded together to erase the people who carried it, rather than let it exist unchecked in the world. He thought about his mother, a woman he'd never known, carrying the weight of a destroyed homeland inside her the entire time she lived in this village, never once telling anyone the full truth of what she might have been capable of. He thought about the chains, cold and impossibly strong, answering his call in the instant he'd believed Sasuke was about to die, and the way his whole body had felt hollowed out afterward, like something vital had been spent and hadn't yet been replaced. Adamantine Chakra Mode, he thought, testing the words silently. The mark of Uzumaki royal bloodline. It didn't feel real yet. Not really. It felt like a story someone else had handed him, one he hadn't quite finished reading, with an ending still buried somewhere further down the scroll. But one thing felt certain, standing there under a sky scattered with stars, in a village built on the ashes of old wars and older secrets. Whatever this power was, whatever it cost, and whatever dangers it might eventually draw toward him, Naruto Uzumaki wasn't going to run from it. He was going to learn to master it. On his own terms. However long it took. The training ground Kakashi chose was a clearing well outside the usual paths genin teams used for their exercises. Quiet, isolated, ringed by tall trees that blocked most casual foot traffic from wandering close enough to see anything unusual. It was the kind of place a person picked when they specifically didn't want an audience. This is far enough out that nobody should stumble across us, Kakashi said, surveying the clearing with a critical eye. Which, given what we're about to attempt, is exactly what we want. You keep saying that like something's gonna go wrong, Naruto said, stretching his arms over his head, practically vibrating with restless energy. It's just chains, right? I already did it once. How hard can it be to do it again? That, Kakashi said dryly, is precisely the attitude that worries me. Naruto grinned unbothered. 3 days had passed since the conversation in the Hokage's office. 3 days of Naruto barely sleeping through the anticipation of finally getting to test this new power on his own terms, in a controlled setting, without an enemy ninja trying to turn him into a human pincushion at the same time. Okay, Kakashi said, clapping his hands together once. Let's start with something simple. On the bridge, the chains erupted defensively, an instinctive reaction to protect yourself and Sasuke. I want you to try summoning even a single chain. Not a wall of them. Just one. Consider it a first step. 1 chain? That's it, Kakashi confirmed. Walk before you run, Naruto. This isn't the Rasengan. This is a bloodline technique that, as far as either of us currently understands, draws on more than just your ordinary chakra reserves. I want to see what a small, controlled attempt looks like before we go anywhere near what happened on that bridge. Naruto nodded, some of his usual bluster settling into something more focused. He planted his feet, closed his eyes, and tried to remember exactly what it had felt like in that split second on the bridge. The cold, deep, patient weight that had answered his need, the sensation of something ancient stirring at the very edge of his awareness. He reached for it. Nothing happened. He tried again, screwing his eyes shut tighter, focusing harder, willing a chain to erupt from his shoulder the way one had on instinct days earlier. Still nothing. Not even a flicker of the strange, cold static he remembered feeling in the air that day. Huh, Naruto said, opening one eye to check if maybe something had happened that he just hadn't felt. Nothing had. Okay, that's weird. Why isn't it working? Try again, Kakashi said patiently. Perhaps it takes more concentration than a single attempt. Naruto tried again. And again. And again after that, each attempt looking more or less identical from the outside, a stubborn, sweating 12-year-old standing in the middle of a clearing with his eyes screwed shut and his fists clenched, willing something to happen that simply refused to cooperate. By the 15th attempt, sweat was running freely down Naruto's temples, and his shoulders had begun to sag with something that looked distinctly like frustration bordering on despair. This is stupid, he muttered. I did it on the bridge without even trying. Why can't I do it now when I actually want to? Because on the bridge came a new voice from the tree line. You weren't trying at all. You were dying. There's a difference, kid, and it's a bigger one than you'd think. Naruto spun around, and there, leaning casually against a tree trunk with his customary oversized scroll slung across his back, stood Jiraiya, the toad summoning Sannin, back in Konoha far earlier than his usual meandering travel schedule would have suggested. Pervy sage! Naruto blurted, surprise momentarily overriding his frustration. What are you doing here? I thought you were off doing your research thing 3 countries over. I was, Jiraiya said, pushing off from the tree and strolling into the clearing with the easy confidence of a man who had never once in his life worried about being unwelcome anywhere. Until about 4 days ago, when I felt something halfway across the land of fire that made every hair on the back of my neck stand straight up. A very particular, very familiar chakra signature, doing something it had absolutely no business doing. His eyes settled on Naruto with an intensity that was rare for the usually easygoing sage. Kakashi's message reached me not long after that, Jiraiya continued, confirming what I'd already half suspected the moment I felt it. So I turned around and made significantly better time getting back here than I normally bother with. Wait, Naruto said slowly, you felt it? From that far away? What, is this chain thing seriously that big a deal? Jiraiya exchanged a brief look with Kakashi, the kind of look that passed between 2 adults who had already discussed something serious, and were now deciding how much of it a 12-year-old needed to hear, all at once. Kid, Jiraiya said, crouching down slightly to meet Naruto's eye level, his expression unusually grave for a man normally defined by his loud laughter and louder personality. Yeah? It's a very big deal. Bigger, honestly, than I think either you or Kakashi have fully wrapped your heads around yet. Which is exactly why I'm here. They sat down together at the edge of the clearing a short while later, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Naruto, with a small pot of tea that Kakashi had brought along and set to warm over a low fire, steam curling up into the cool afternoon air. Kakashi filled me in on what he found in the archive, Jiraiya said, accepting a cup of tea and cradling it between both hands. The history of Uzumaki, the description of the adamantine sealing chains, the rarer chakra mode variant tied to the old royal bloodline. All of it lines up with what I already knew, though admittedly, I know some things that archive doesn't cover, because I actually lived through parts of that history myself. You knew about Uzumaki? Naruto asked, leaning forward. Like, you were actually around back then? I was around for the end of it, Jiraiya said, something distant and grim passing behind his eyes. I was young myself, but old enough to remember when word reached the leaf that Uzumaki had fallen. Konoha and that village were close allies, you know, closer than most people realize. Your mother's people and this village went back generations. That's actually part of why your mother ended up here in the first place, long before you were ever born. Naruto absorbed that quietly, turning his own cup of tea slowly in his hands without drinking from it. Okay, he said after a moment. So you knew about the chains? About the whole royal bloodline thing? I knew the stories, Jiraiya corrected. Whispers, mostly. Rumors about a select handful of Uzumaki, across generations, who manifested something beyond the ordinary chain technique, full transformations, hardened chakra shrouds fused with the chains, strength and durability that made them nearly unstoppable in battle. I never actually witnessed it myself. As far as I knew, until about 4 days ago, it might as well have been a legend. A story told to make a already formidable clan sound even more impressive than they already were. And now? Kakashi asked quietly. And now, Jiraiya said, looking directly at Naruto, I've felt exactly what that legend feels like when it's not a legend at all, radiating off a 12-year-old boy from clear across the region. So no, I don't think it's a story anymore. Naruto felt a strange mixture of pride and unease settle in his chest at those words. Pride because apparently what he'd done on that bridge was significant enough that a legendary Sannin had felt it happening from an entire country away. Unease, because that same fact meant the power inside him was clearly a great deal larger and more dangerous than he'd initially let himself believe. So why can't I do it again? Naruto asked, gesturing at himself in mild frustration. I've been trying for like an hour. Nothing. Not even a little spark of it. Jiraiya set his tea down and regarded Naruto with an expression that was, for once, entirely serious. Because you're going about it completely wrong, he said. And honestly, kid, that's not your fault. Nobody's ever taught you the right way, because nobody currently alive really knows the right way. We're going to have to figure this out together, carefully. And I mean carefully, because getting this wrong isn't just a matter of failing a training exercise. What do you mean? Jiraiya glanced at Kakashi, who gave a small nod, apparently deferring the explanation to the more experienced Sannin. Tell me something, Jiraiya said. After the fight on the bridge, once the chains disappeared, how did you feel? Exhausted, Naruto admitted. Like, way more than normal. Kind of hollow, almost? Like something got scooped out of me that wasn't just chakra. Jiraiya nodded slowly, like he'd expected exactly that answer. That's the part of this that worries me most, he said. Ordinary chakra exhaustion, the kind you feel after overusing the Rasengan or pushing yourself too hard in a fight, that recovers with rest. A night's sleep, a good meal, maybe a day or two, and you're back to normal. What you're describing sounds like something different. Something that doesn't come back with rest alone. The scroll mentioned that, Kakashi said quietly. Life force. Not just chakra. Right, Jiraiya said grimly. And here's the thing about life force, kid, chakra regenerates. It's a renewable resource, more or less, as long as you don't push yourself completely dry. Life force isn't like that. You spend life force, you don't get it back. Not through rest, not through food, not through anything except time itself, ticking forward the normal way it always does. If this power draws on that well every time you use it, then every activation without proper control is potentially shaving years off the life you'd otherwise have had. The clearing went very quiet. Naruto stared down at his own hands again, a gesture that was becoming something of a habit these past few days, as though he half expected to find some visible mark on his skin that would explain everything currently happening inside him. So every time I use it, he said slowly, I'm just using myself up? Like a candle burning down? Potentially, Jiraiya said, not softening the truth, because that clearly wasn't his style, and because Naruto clearly needed to hear it straight. Which is exactly why forcing this without proper understanding is dangerous in a way that goes way beyond your typical training risks. This isn't a jutsu where the worst outcome is chakra exhaustion and a nap. Push this the wrong way, kid, and you could genuinely be trading years of your life for power you don't yet know how to properly wield. Naruto swallowed hard, the weight of that truth settling heavily over him. Okay, he said quietly. So how do I stop that from happening? There's gotta be a way to use it that doesn't cost me like that. Right, there has to be, Jiraiya agreed. Because otherwise every Uzumaki who ever manifested this trait would have been signing their own early death warrant every time they drew on it, and that doesn't track with what little history survives about the clan. Somewhere, there was almost certainly a method, training, discipline, some way of drawing on the mode that doesn't cost quite so dearly. We just don't currently know what that method is. Which means we're going to have to find out. Carefully. Slowly. And with a lot more caution than throwing yourself at this clearing for an hour hoping something happens. If you're finding this arc as tense as I am writing it, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because the training that's coming up over the next several chapters is going to be one of the most important parts of this entire story. Ring the bell too, so you don't miss a single step of it. Now let's get back to the clearing, because Naruto, being Naruto, was not about to just accept we don't currently know as a satisfying answer. Okay, well, Naruto said, standing up and dusting off his pants with sudden determination, then let's figure it out. I'm not just gonna sit around waiting for somebody else to solve this for me. What if I try again? But this time actually paying attention to what I'm doing instead of just trying to force it. That's actually not a bad instinct, Jiraiya admitted, pushing himself up as well. Forcing this the way you were doing it before, brute willpower. Trying to recreate a life-or-death moment through sheer stubbornness. That's probably part of why nothing happened. This power seems to respond to something more specific than raw effort. So what then? Naruto asked. What am I supposed to do instead? Let's start by understanding what actually happened on that bridge step by step, Kakashi said, standing as well and moving to join them in the center of the clearing. Walk me through it again, Naruto, not just the broad strokes. Every detail you can remember about what you were thinking, feeling, in the instant before the chains appeared. Naruto closed his eyes, forcing himself back through the memory. The ice mirrors closing in, the Senbon storm descending, the absolute cold certainty that Sasuke was about to die because Naruto hadn't been fast enough. I wasn't thinking about myself at all, he said slowly, eyes still closed. That's the thing. I wasn't scared for me. I was scared for Sasuke. Like, completely focused on him, on the idea that I couldn't let him get hurt, that it would be my fault if he died because I hadn't done enough. Interesting, Jiraiya murmured, exchanging another look with Kakashi. So it wasn't self-preservation that triggered it. It was concern for someone else. Focus outward, rather than inward, Kakashi said thoughtfully. That does track with some of what little I've read about Uzumaki's sealing philosophy, actually. A lot of their techniques were built around the idea of binding and protecting, chains meant to hold something in place, to keep something from breaking free and causing harm to others. Perhaps the mode responds most readily to that same underlying intention. So I need to, think about protecting somebody. Right now? In the middle of an empty training field with nobody around to protect? Naruto said, gesturing at the clearly deserted clearing around them. Not literally, Jiraiya said. But maybe the feeling of it. The intention behind it. Try summoning the chain again. But this time, don't focus on forcing the technique itself. Focus on the feeling you had in that moment. The absolute refusal to let something you cared about be harmed. Naruto closed his eyes again, and this time, instead of gritting his teeth and trying to physically wrench the chains into existence through sheer force of will, he let his mind drift back to that specific feeling, the fierce, protective certainty that had gripped him on the bridge, the image of Sasuke standing back to back with him, trusting him not to let either of them fall. Something shifted. It was subtle at first, a faint prickle along his shoulder blades, a whisper of that same cold, patient weight he remembered from the bridge, stirring somewhere deep beneath his ordinary chakra network. Naruto held perfectly still, afraid that moving or thinking too hard would scare it away entirely. And then, slowly, almost hesitantly, a single length of dark chain emerged from his shoulder, nowhere near the explosive burst of a dozen chains that had shattered Haku's ice mirrors, just one, thin, uncertain link extending perhaps half a meter into the air before wavering and holding. Naruto's eyes flew open. I did it! Look, it's actually... The moment his focus shifted to excitement, to the thrill of success rather than the quiet, protective intention that had summoned it, the single chain dissolved into motes of dark chakra and vanished. Ah, come on! Naruto groaned, staring at his now empty shoulder in frustration. No, that's actually good, Jiraiya said, holding up a hand before Naruto's frustration could fully take hold. That's real progress, kid. You just proved the theory. This isn't about forcing raw power through sheer will. It responds to something more specific, a particular emotional and mental state. That's incredibly useful information. It's useful, but it also disappeared the second I got excited, Naruto pointed out. That's not exactly something I can use in a real fight if it vanishes the moment I feel anything other than calm, protective focus. Which is exactly why this is going to take real training, rather than a single lucky breakthrough, Kakashi said. You need to learn to hold that specific mental and emotional state deliberately, and sustain it even under pressure, even in the middle of combat, even when your own excitement or fear or anger might otherwise pull your focus elsewhere. That's not something that happens in one afternoon. Naruto let out a long breath, some of his earlier frustration settling into something more like grim determination. Okay. Fine. So it's gonna take work. I can do work. Let's keep going. Actually, Jiraiya said, checking the fading light through the tree canopy above them, I think that's enough for one day. You managed to summon a single chain, however briefly. That's a solid result for a first real attempt, and pushing further today, right after learning what this technique might cost you, isn't wise. We continue tomorrow, with fresh minds and fresh chakra. Come on, one more try, Naruto. Kakashi's voice carried just enough weight to cut through the protest. We just told you this technique may be quietly costing you years of your own life every time you use it carelessly. I understand the excitement. But exercising restraint, right now, in this moment, is itself part of the discipline this power demands. Let's not undercut the lesson before it's even finished sinking in. That landed. Naruto's shoulders sagged, but he nodded, some of the day's earlier lessons clearly settling in beneath the surface excitement. Yeah. Okay. You're right. He managed a small, tired grin. Tomorrow, then? I'll do it right this time. A whole chain, on command, no accidentally vanishing it because I got too excited. That's the spirit, Jiraiya said, clapping him on the shoulder with enough force to nearly stagger him. Slow and steady, kid, trust me. I've seen plenty of shinobi try to rush past careful training in favor of raw power, and it rarely ends well for them in the long run. That evening, as the three of them walked back toward the village proper, Naruto found himself unusually quiet, processing the day's lessons with far more care than his usual scattered enthusiasm typically allowed. Hey, pervy sage, he said eventually, breaking the comfortable silence. Can I ask you something? Depends what it is, Jiraiya said, though his tone was easy, inviting. Did you know my dad too? Not just my mom? Jiraiya went very still for a moment, and beside him, Kakashi's expression carefully smoothed into neutrality in a way that Naruto was beginning to recognize as a very specific tell, the same careful blankness that had crossed Kakashi's face back in the archive when he'd let slip the word parents instead of just mother. That, Jiraiya said slowly, is a much bigger conversation than the one we've had time for today, kid. And it's not entirely my story to tell first. That's what Kakashi-sensei said too, Naruto said, a note of frustration creeping back into his voice. Everybody keeps telling me there's some bigger story, but nobody's actually telling me what it is. There's a reason for that, Jiraiya said, and something in his voice, old grief, old caution, old love for people long gone, made Naruto swallow his protest for the second time that week. When the time is right, you'll know everything. I promise you that. But some truths need the right moment to land properly, and I don't think tonight, right after everything else you've just learned, is that moment. Can you trust me on that, just a little longer? Naruto studied the old Sanin's face for a long moment, searching, the way he always did, for any sign that the adults around him were hiding something out of dismissiveness rather than genuine care. What he found instead was something that looked a great deal like grief carefully held in check, and something that looked a great deal like love for people Naruto had never had the chance to meet. Yeah, he said finally quietly. Okay. I can wait a little longer. Good man, Jiraiya said, some of his usual easy warmth returning as he ruffled Naruto's hair with rough affection. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow, we work on making that single chain of yours a little more reliable, and a little less prone to disappearing the second you get excited about it. Naruto grinned despite himself, some of the day's heaviness lifting at the easy familiarity of the old sage's tone. Yeah? I'll be there bright and early. You'll see, I'm gonna have this whole thing figured out way faster than either of you think. We'll see, Kakashi said, the barest hint of amusement finally returning to his voice as well. Get some sleep, Naruto. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Naruto walked the rest of the way home alone, hands tucked behind his head, staring up at a sky slowly filling with stars, turning the day's lessons over in his mind. A single chain, however briefly held. A power that responded not to force, but to something quieter, the fierce, protective refusal to let someone he cared about come to harm. A cost, buried somewhere in every activation, that could quietly steal away years of his life if he wasn't careful enough to master it properly. It should have felt discouraging, maybe. An entire afternoon of effort, and all he had to show for it was one wavering chain that vanished the moment he felt anything other than perfect calm. Instead, it felt like the first real step of something much larger, the beginning of actually understanding a legacy that had been sleeping inside him his entire life, waiting for the right person to finally start listening to what it was trying to teach him. Slow and steady, he thought, echoing Jiraiya's words. Yeah. I can do that. I can definitely do that. Tomorrow, he'd summon that chain again. And the day after that, he'd hold it a little longer. And the day after that, a little longer still, until one day, however far off it might currently seem, he'd be able to call on this power exactly when he needed it, fully in control, without any fear of what it might quietly be costing him in the process. He just had no idea yet how soon that control was going to be tested for real, because word was already beginning to travel through certain very dangerous circles about a leaf genin who had shattered an A-rank technique on a bridge in the land of waves using a power nobody outside a handful of people even remembered still existed. 3 weeks had passed since that first afternoon in the isolated training clearing, and in that time, something had genuinely started to shift in Naruto. It wasn't dramatic. He hadn't suddenly transformed into some serene, disciplined master of his own bloodline overnight. Anyone who knew him would have laughed at the very idea. But there was a new layer of focus underneath his usual noise, a habit of pausing for half a second before charging into something, just long enough to check whether he was thinking about himself or about the people around him. That distinction, it turned out, mattered more than almost anything else about the Adamantine Mode. Again, Kakashi said, standing at the edge of the clearing with his arms crossed, watching closely. Naruto closed his eyes, breathed out slowly, and reached for that same quiet, protective certainty he'd found weeks earlier. Not force, not desperation, just the simple, settled resolve that nothing was going to get past him to hurt the people standing behind him. This time, there was no test dummy standing in for Sasuke, no real danger anywhere in the clearing, just a memory, held steady in his mind, of a promise he intended to keep. A single chain extended from his shoulder, thick as a grown man's forearm, hanging steady in the morning air for 3 full seconds before Naruto let the intention go and allowed it to dissolve smoothly, rather than have it snap away in an uncontrolled burst. Better, Kakashi said, something like genuine approval in his voice. 3 seconds of stable hold, clean release. That's real progress from where you started. 3 seconds doesn't feel like much, Naruto admitted, a little out of breath despite the modest scale of the technique. Feels like I could hold way more than one chain that long, if I really pushed. Probably true, Kakashi said. But we're not pushing yet. We're building a foundation first. Control before scale, remember? Yeah? Jiraiya's rule number 1. I remember. Jiraiya himself wasn't present that particular morning, called away on some errand for the Hokage that he'd been characteristically vague about. But his training philosophy had become something of a mantra. Over the past 3 weeks, control before scale, precision before power, understanding before ambition. Naruto had grumbled about the pace more than once, but even he had to admit the results were undeniable. What had started as a single uncontrolled chain vanishing the instant he felt any flicker of excitement had, slowly, steadily, become something he could summon and hold with real, if still limited, precision. The cost, too, had grown more manageable. That first afternoon, a few seconds of chain generation had left him hollowed out for the better part of a day. Now, after weeks of careful, incremental training, the same brief hold barely made him feel more tired than an ordinary training session would have. That's the part that actually worries me a little, Kakashi admitted, when Naruto pointed this improvement out during a water break. It's good news, in the sense that it means proper training genuinely can reduce the strain this power places on you. But I want us both to remember, just because it costs less right now, at this modest scale, doesn't mean the cost disappears entirely once we start asking for more. I know, Naruto said, waving a hand. Slow and steady. I get it, sensei. I've heard it like 100 times now. Good, Kakashi said. Because you're about to have a lot more incentive to forget that lesson. Naruto blinked. Wait, what do you mean? The Chūnin Exams, Kakashi said. Registration opens this week. I intend to nominate Team 7. Some of you already know exactly how this part of the story goes in canon. The tension in the classroom during the written exam. Ibiki Marino's brutal psychological pressure test disguised as a test of cheating skill. Enko Midarashi's theatrical entrance, and the forest of death that followed. Most of that plays out here almost exactly the way you remember it. Almost. Because this time, there was a very specific difference lurking underneath the surface of an otherwise familiar story. One that would come to matter a great deal more than anybody in that exam hall currently realized. The written exam went by in the tense, sweat-soaked blur that anyone who's read the manga or watched the anime already knows well. Ibiki's carefully constructed trap of a test, designed less to measure knowledge and more to measure a genin's willingness to gather information under pressure without getting caught. The slow attrition of team after team as hands shot up in surrender across the room, and finally, the dramatic reveal of the 10th question and its impossible, terrifying stakes. Naruto, true to form, refused to quit even when faced with the possibility of permanently sacrificing his ninja career. Standing up and declaring his resolve loud enough for the entire room to hear. What was different, subtly, quietly, was the way Sasuke watched him do it, because Sasuke had been there on that bridge and wave. Sasuke had felt those chains erupt around him, had watched an A-rank technique shatter into glittering fragments in the span of a single heartbeat, and had spent the weeks since then noticing, in ways he hadn't fully articulated even to himself, the way Naruto occasionally seemed to drift into a strange, distant focus during training, the way his teammate had grown, almost imperceptibly, steadier. He's hiding something, Sasuke thought, watching Naruto's declaration ring out across the exam hall. Something big. And whatever it is, it's changing him. He filed the observation away without comment, the way Sasuke tended to file most things away, and turned his attention back to Ibiki as Enko Midarashi burst through the door to announce the second stage of the exam. The forest of death lived up to its name in this telling exactly as thoroughly as it always had. Towering trees blocking out most of the sunlight, the distant screech of enormous insects, and the rustle of things moving through undergrowth that were never quite fully visible, the constant low hum of danger pressing in from every direction. Team 7 moved through the forest with practiced caution, working toward the tower at the center of the training ground with both scrolls already secured through a combination of careful strategy and Sakura's quick thinking, a small deviation from canon that saved them the trouble of the Orochimaru encounter that had defined this stage of the exam in the original story. That deviation, unfortunately, only delayed the danger. It didn't eliminate it, because in this telling, Orochimaru had a different priority entering the forest, one that had nothing at all to do with testing Sasuke's Sharingan potential. There came a soft, unsettling voice from somewhere in the canopy above, as Team 7 paused to catch their breath near a small, muddy stream cutting through the undergrowth. The boy from the bridge. Naruto's head snapped up instantly, every instinct honed by 3 weeks of careful training screaming at him that something was very wrong. Who's there? Sasuke demanded, kunai already in hand, positioning himself protectively in front of Sakura without seeming to think about it. A figure dropped from the branches above with unnerving grace, landing lightly on the muddy bank of the stream, pale, unnaturally smooth skin, long dark hair, golden eyes that carried an intensity that made the hair on the back of Naruto's neck stand straight up even before the figure spoke another word. My, the figure said, a slow, unsettling smile spreading across an otherwise handsome face. Kakashi's little genin team, and here I thought I'd have to search half this forest before I found the one I was actually looking for. Who are you? Sakura demanded, voice steady despite the obvious tremor of fear beneath it. A curious traveler, the figure said, with an interest in a very particular kind of power. One I'd heard rumors about, whispers of a bridge in Wave Country, and a genin who shattered an A-rank technique using a bloodline nobody's seen in decades. Naruto's stomach dropped. He knows. Somehow, he already knows about the chains. I don't know what you're talking about, Naruto said, forcing false confidence into his voice even as every muscle in his body tensed. Don't you? The figure said, golden eyes narrowing with something between amusement and hunger. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, Naruto Uzumaki, the last living heir, as far as I can determine, of Uzushigakure's forgotten royal bloodline. A power capable of producing chains hard enough to bind or shatter almost anything they strike, and more importantly to someone like me, a sealing legacy unmatched by any village currently standing. You have no idea how long I've searched for exactly that kind of raw material to study. Study, Sasuke repeated coldly. You mean experiment on? Astute, the figure said, that unsettling smile widening further. You may call me Orochimaru, if introductions matter to you at all in the next few minutes, though I suspect what happens next will matter rather more. If you've watched the original story, you already know Orochimaru's reputation, a rogue Sannin, former student of the third Hokage, driven by an obsession with forbidden techniques and an insatiable hunger for power in all its forms. In the story you know, his primary fixation during the Chūnin Exams was Sasuke's Uchiha bloodline, the promise of the Sharingan's potential drawing him like a moth to flame. Here, that fixation had shifted entirely. Because whatever Orochimaru had heard about a bridge in Wave Country, about chains capable of shattering ice mirrors, about a bloodline everyone believed extinguished for good decades earlier, that had eclipsed even his interest in the Uchiha entirely. You're not getting anywhere near him, Sasuke said, stepping forward, Sharingan already flaring to life in both eyes. How touching, Orochimaru said, sounding entirely unbothered by the threat. But I'm afraid the Sharingan, however impressive, simply isn't what I came here for today. He moved before any of them could fully react, faster than should have been possible, closing the distance in the space of a single breath, one hand already extending toward Naruto with fingers curled like claws. Naruto's body reacted before his mind could catch up, 3 weeks of careful training kicking in on pure instinct. Not the wild, uncontrolled burst from the bridge, but something steadier, more deliberate. A single thick chain erupting from his shoulder, and slamming directly into Orochimaru's outstretched hand with enough force to send the Sannin skidding backward across the muddy bank. The forest went very quiet. Orochimaru straightened slowly, examining his own hand with something that looked disturbingly like delight rather than pain. Oh, he breathed, golden eyes practically glowing with fascination. Oh, that's even better than I'd hoped. Controlled, deliberate, precise. Someone's been training you properly. How wonderfully efficient. Get away from my team, Naruto said, voice steady despite the cold fear pooling in his stomach, another chain already forming at his other shoulder in a defensive stance that mirrored, almost unconsciously, the lattice he'd summoned on the bridge weeks earlier. I don't think I will, actually, Orochimaru said, tilting his head, studying Naruto with the clinical intensity of a collector examining a rare specimen. Do you have any idea, boy, what you actually are? What that bloodline running through your veins is truly capable of, in the right hands, with the right guidance? I could show you power beyond anything your current teachers are willing or able to give you. I don't want anything from you, Naruto said flatly. Everyone says that, Orochimaru said, almost fondly, right up until they realize exactly what they're capable of becoming. He surged forward again, and this time Naruto was ready, 2 chains snapping forward in a coordinated strike that forced Orochimaru to abandon his advance and twist aside at the last possible instant, one chain catching against his sleeve and tearing a long gash through the fabric before he wrenched free. Impressive, Orochimaru said, genuine surprise coloring his voice now, some of the earlier condescension fading into something more calculating. Truly impressive, for someone so early in their training. I confess, I expected considerably less resistance. Sakura, get behind me, Sasuke said sharply, positioning himself alongside Naruto now, kunai raised, Sharingan tracking every flicker of Orochimaru's movement. Oh, don't worry, Orochimaru said, waving a dismissive hand towards Sasuke without even sparing him a full glance. I have no interest in you today, Uchiha. Your bloodline, however fascinating, pales considerably next to what I've just witnessed. Perhaps another time. That dismissal, more than any direct insult could have managed, visibly stung. A flicker of something dark and wounded crossing Sasuke's features before he forced it back down beneath his usual composed mask. Orochimaru's attention returned fully to Naruto, and for a long, tense moment, the clearing held perfectly still, the only sound the distant screech of forest insects and the rapid, controlled breathing of 3 genin bracing for whatever came next. I won't force the issue today, Orochimaru said finally, something in his tone shifting toward patient calculation rather than immediate aggression. You're clearly under careful guidance already, and forcing this confrontation further risks damaging something I'd much rather study intact. But mark my words, Naruto Uzumaki, I don't abandon my interests easily. We will speak again, under circumstances rather more favorable to me than this forest currently provides. With that, he simply vanished, not the dramatic ninjutsu flourish some of you might expect, but a quiet, unsettling dissolution into the surrounding foliage that left no trace he'd ever been there at all beyond the torn sleeve fabric still clutched in Naruto's chain. Silence settled over the clearing. Okay, Sakura said finally, her voice shaking slightly despite her best efforts to steady it. Does somebody want to explain what in the world that was? Both the him, and the chains? Naruto let the remaining chain dissolve slowly, carefully, the way Kakashi had drilled into him over the past 3 weeks, and turned to face his teammates with an expression that mixed exhaustion, fear, and a heavy, unavoidable resignation. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess it's time I actually told you guys what's been going on. If you've been enjoying this story so far, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button, because things are about to escalate a lot faster than anyone in this forest is prepared for. Ring that notification bell too, you're not going to want to miss what's coming. Naruto gave Sakura and Sasuke a condensed version of everything: the awakening on the bridge, the archive beneath the Hokage's tower, Uzumaki and its destruction, the weeks of careful training with Kakashi and Jiraiya, and the grim warning about the mode's cost to his own lifespan if used carelessly. Sakura listened with wide, increasingly horrified eyes. Sasuke listened with the careful, unreadable stillness that had become his default expression whenever something genuinely rattled him. So that's why you've been so weird lately, Sakura said finally, once Naruto finished. Disappearing for training on your own, that faraway look you get sometimes. I thought maybe something was wrong, but I never imagined this. Yeah, well, Naruto said, rubbing the back of his neck, wasn't exactly something I could just casually bring up over lunch, you know? Hey guys, turns out I'm secretly some kind of last of a dead village prince, no big deal. That snake man wants to experiment on you, Sasuke said flatly, cutting straight to the part that clearly bothered him most. That's what he meant, wasn't it? Study you? Like some kind of specimen. Yeah, Naruto admitted, some of his usual bravado faltering. Kakashi-sensei and the old man both warned me people might come after this power eventually. Guess I didn't expect it to happen quite this fast. We need to report this, Sasuke said immediately. Right now. Forget finishing the exam. If Orochimaru's actively hunting you, that changes everything. No, Naruto said, surprising even himself with the firmness in his own voice. We finished the exam. Naruto, are you serious right now? A Sannin just. I know what just happened. Naruto snapped, some of his fear finally breaking through the surface. I know he wants to use me for whatever twisted experiments he's got planned, but running back to the village with my tail between my legs isn't gonna make that threat go away, Sasuke. It's just gonna mean I quit before I even had the chance to prove I can handle this. And besides, his voice softened slightly, some of the earlier fire settling into quiet, stubborn resolve. If I run now, every time something scary comes up because of this power, I'm just gonna keep running. That's not who I wanna be. Not about this. Not about anything. Sasuke studied him for a long moment, something complicated shifting behind his dark eyes, frustration, worry, and underneath it all, something that looked almost like reluctant respect. Fine, he said finally. But if that snake shows up again, we don't try to be heroes about it. We regroup and retreat if we have to. Deal? Deal, Naruto agreed. For what it's worth, Sakura added quietly, stepping closer, some of her earlier fear giving way to quiet determination of her own. Whatever this is, Naruto, whatever you're carrying, you're not carrying it alone. We're a team. That means all of it, not just the easy parts. Naruto looked at his two teammates for a long moment, something warm cutting through the cold fear that had settled in his chest since Orochimaru's appearance. Thanks, he said quietly. Both of you. Seriously. Don't get sappy about it, Sasuke said, though there was no real heat behind the words. Let's just get to that tower before something else decides to try to kill us today. They reached the central tower without further incident, delivering both scrolls and passing the second stage of the exam with the rest of the qualifying teams, though the encounter with Orochimaru cast a long shadow over what should have been a moment of straightforward relief. Kakashi's reaction, once Naruto reported the encounter in full detail back at the tower, was about as grim as Naruto had expected. He confronted you directly, Kakashi said, jaw tight, in the middle of an exam supposedly monitored by proctors from every major village. That's either remarkably reckless on his part, or a very deliberate message that he doesn't consider Konoha's security much of an obstacle to what he wants. He said he wasn't gonna force the issue today, Naruto said. Said he'd rather study me intact than risk damaging me by pushing things too hard right now. That's not reassurance, Kakashi said grimly. That's a predator deciding to wait for better hunting conditions. We need to inform Lord Hokage immediately, and I suspect exam security is about to become considerably tighter than originally planned. It did. Word of Orochimaru's presence within the exam grounds sent a ripple of quiet alarm through the proctors and jonin overseeing the remaining stages. Security measures quietly tightened in ways most of the participating genin never fully noticed, all while the exams themselves continued forward on their scheduled timeline. Because canceling the entire event risked drawing exactly the kind of attention nobody currently wanted focused on Asanin's movements within Konoha's borders. The preliminary matches, held shortly after, proceeded largely as they always had. Sasuke's battle against Yoroikato, complicated by lingering effects from an encounter with Orochimaru that, in this telling, had never actually happened, leaving Sasuke to fight with his full strength intact rather than nursing a mysterious curse mark injury. Shikamaru's clever, characteristically lazy victory through careful strategy. Sakura's grueling, ultimately drawn battle against Ino Yamanaka, ending in a double knockout that spoke to the deep, complicated bond between the two former friends. And then, finally, it was Naruto's turn. His opponent, drawn by the arena's randomized bracket system, turned out to be a lean, quiet genin from the Hidden Sound village, one of the very team Orochimaru had personally overseen during the exam's earlier stages. A fact Naruto only realized with a cold jolt of understanding once the match had already been called. This one's mine, the Sound genin said quietly, stepping into the arena with an unsettling, focused calm that reminded Naruto uncomfortably of his encounter in the forest. Lord Orochimaru specifically requested I evaluate your combat capabilities. Consider this an audition. Great, Naruto thought grimly, settling into a defensive stance across the arena floor. He's still watching. Even from wherever he's hiding right now. Then I guess you're gonna have a pretty disappointing report to give him, Naruto said aloud, forcing his usual confident grin back onto his face despite the unease coiling in his stomach. The match that followed tested every ounce of the control Naruto had built over the past several weeks. The Sound genin fought with a strange, disorienting technique that seemed to interfere subtly with chakra flow on contact. Nothing overtly dangerous on its own, but clearly designed to probe and measure exactly how Naruto's newly awakened bloodline responded under genuine combat pressure. Naruto, mindful of Kakashi's repeated warnings about restraint, resisted the urge to summon the full chain lattice from the bridge, instead relying on a single, precisely controlled chain to intercept strikes and create openings, mixing the technique carefully with his ordinary taijutsu and a handful of shadow clones to keep his opponent guessing. It worked. Barely. The match ended with Naruto securing a hard-fought victory through a combination of clever clone tactics and a single, perfectly timed chain strike that disarmed his opponent without revealing the full extent of what he was truly capable of. But as he walked off the arena floor, breathing hard, exhausted in that now familiar way that mixed ordinary chakra fatigue with something deeper and colder underneath, he caught sight of a figure in the shadowed observation seats above, golden eyes, watching with quiet, patient satisfaction, before withdrawing back into the crowd and vanishing from sight entirely. He's not done, Naruto thought grimly, forcing himself to keep walking despite the cold weight settling in his chest. He's just getting started. That evening, back at the hospital wing where the exam participants were being checked over, Kakashi found Naruto sitting alone on a bench outside, staring up at the darkening sky with an expression far more serious than his usual post-victory grin. "You did well out there," Kakashi said, settling down beside him. "Controlled use of the chain, careful integration with your other techniques. That's exactly the kind of restraint we've been working toward." "He was watching," Naruto said quietly, not really responding to the praise. "Orochimaru. I saw him in the stands before he disappeared again." Kakashi's expression tightened. "I feared as much. He's not gonna stop, is he?" Naruto said. It wasn't really a question. Whatever's coming next, the finals, or whatever happens after, he's gonna be there. Waiting for his chance. Probably, Kakashi admitted, seeing no point in softening a truth Naruto had clearly already worked out for himself. Which means we need to be more prepared than ever, both for whatever the remaining exam stages bring, and for whatever Orochimaru might attempt during them. I won't lie to you, Naruto. This situation has grown considerably more dangerous than any of us anticipated when this all started on that bridge in Wave. Naruto was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the first faint stars beginning to emerge overhead. "You know what's weird?" he said finally. "A few weeks ago, finding out about all this, the chains, Uzumaki, all of it, that felt like finally getting a piece of myself I never had before. Something that made me feel less alone, you know? Like I actually belonged to something, even if that something doesn't exist anymore. And now?" Kakashi asked quietly. "And now it feels like that same piece of myself is what's putting everyone I care about in danger," Naruto said, voice tight. "Sasuke, Sakura, this whole village. Everybody's in danger because of something that woke up inside me that I didn't even ask for." Kakashi was quiet for a moment, choosing his next words carefully. "Naruto," he said finally, "every shinobi carries something that makes them a target eventually. A bloodline, a technique, a connection to someone powerful, sometimes simply the potential others see in them before they'd even had the chance to grow into it. The danger was never something you brought into existence by discovering this power. It's something that already existed in the world, waiting for a reason to notice you. The only real choice you have now is how you respond to it. And how am I supposed to respond to a Sannin who wants to dissect me like some kind of science experiment? By getting stronger," Kakashi said simply. "By training harder, understanding this power more deeply, and surrounding yourself with people who will stand beside you when the moment eventually comes. Which, from what I understand of tonight's conversation with your teammates, you've already begun doing rather well." That drew a small, tired smile out of Naruto despite everything. "Yeah. Sasuke and Sakura took it pretty well, all things considered. Well, Sasuke wanted to pull me straight out of the exam the second Orochimaru showed up. Had to talk him down." "That sounds like Sasuke," Kakashi said, the ghost of amusement returning to his voice. "Get some rest, Naruto. Whatever comes next in this exam, you're going to need every bit of strength and clarity you can gather." 3 floors beneath a nondescript building on the outskirts of a village that didn't appear on any official map, Orochimaru sat alone in a dimly lit study, surrounded by scrolls, jars, and specimens collected across decades of relentless research into every forbidden corner of the shinobi world. None of it interested him tonight. Tonight, his attention was fixed entirely on a single sheet of parchment spread across his desk, covered in his own careful, spidery handwriting, notes hastily compiled in the hours immediately following his encounter with Naruto in the Forest of Death. Controlled chain generation. Precision under pressure. Defensive lattice formation consistent with historical accounts of Uzumaki combat doctrine. Estimated latent potential, extraordinary. He traced a finger along the last line, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across his face. "Kabuto," he said, without looking up. A figure stepped out from the shadows near the doorway. A young man with silver hair and round glasses, moving with the quiet, unassuming efficiency of someone accustomed to being underestimated. "Lord Orochimaru? Tell me again what you found in the old records," Orochimaru said. "About the fall of Uzumaki. I want to hear it once more, now that I've seen the boy's power firsthand." Kabuto adjusted his glasses, pulling a slim folder from beneath his arm. "The official history is sparse. As you know, most nations scrubbed detailed records of the conflict from their archives after the fact, likely out of some collective guilt over what was done, but the fragments that survive are consistent. Uzumaki fell not because its shinobi were weak, but because a coalition of rival nations grew afraid of exactly what they represented. Chakra reserves beyond anything comparable clans could match. Sealing techniques capable of trapping and containing forces other villages couldn't even safely study, let alone replicate. And buried in the oldest fragments, references to a rarer manifestation within the royal bloodline. Warriors wrapped in nearly indestructible chakra, wielding chains capable of binding or destroying almost anything in their path. The Adamantine Chakra Mode, Orochimaru murmured, savoring the words like a rare vintage. A power so significant an entire alliance of nations decided the only reasonable response was total annihilation of the people who carried it. That appears to be the historical consensus. Yes, Kabuto confirmed. Do you understand what that means, Kabuto? Orochimaru said, finally looking up, golden eyes bright with an intensity that made even his most trusted subordinate take an involuntary half-step back. In all my years of research, sealing techniques, Kekkei Genkai, every forbidden corner of the shinobi world I've dared to explore, I have never encountered a bloodline so feared that entire nations banded together specifically to erase it. Not diminish it. Not contain it. Erase it, root and branch, so thoroughly that most of the world today doesn't even remember the village existed at all. And now it's resurfaced, Kabuto said, in a 12-year-old orphan with no formal training in it whatsoever, which makes it all the more valuable. Orochimaru said, standing, moving to the window and gazing out at nothing in particular, lost in calculation. A power that raw, that unrefined, is a power ripe for proper study. If I can understand precisely how the Adamantine mode manifests, how it draws on the body's chakra network, and, more importantly, its life force, imagine the applications. Sealing techniques beyond anything currently known. A body capable of surviving injuries that would kill any ordinary shinobi outright. Perhaps, with the proper research, a way to transplant or replicate such a trait entirely, freeing it from the limitations of a single bloodline. You intend to take the boy, Kabuto said. It wasn't a question, eventually Orochimaru said. Though I confess, our encounter in the forest taught me something valuable I hadn't fully anticipated. The boy is already under careful instruction. Someone competent is training him, teaching him restraint and control faster than I expected. That complicates a simple, direct capture. It would be far more efficient, and far more informative for my research, if I could observe him a while longer first, see how his control develops, understand the limits of what guided training can accomplish with this bloodline, before I intervene directly. And the invasion plans? Kabuto asked carefully. Given this shift in priority, should we adjust our approach to the Uchiha boy as well? Orochimaru considered this for a long moment, turning back from the window with a thoughtful expression. No, he said finally. The Uchiha's Sharingan remains valuable, a fallback, a secondary interest, should the Uzumaki prove more difficult to acquire than anticipated, or should something happen to prevent it entirely. But make no mistake, Kabuto. Our primary objective during the invasion has changed. I want eyes on Naruto Uzumaki at every stage of these exams from now until the final confrontation. I want to know exactly how much progress he makes, exactly how far his control extends, and exactly when the optimal moment will be to make my move. Understood, Lord Orochimaru, Kabuto said, bowing slightly before withdrawing back into the shadows. Orochimaru remained by the window a moment longer, staring out at the darkness beyond, a slow, hungry smile still lingering on his face. Soon, he thought. Soon enough, little Uzumaki, you and I are going to have a very long, very illuminating conversation about exactly what you're capable of. If this is giving you chills, good, that's exactly the reaction we're going for. Make sure you're subscribed and that bell is on, because Orochimaru's plans are about to collide directly with the remaining preliminary matches, and things are only getting more dangerous from here. Back in the arena, the preliminary matches continued through the following day, each fight carrying an undercurrent of tension that hadn't existed in quite the same way before Orochimaru's appearance in the forest became common, if quiet, knowledge among the senior shinobi overseeing the exam. Kakashi stood at the edge of the observation platform, arms crossed, eyes scanning the crowd with far more scrutiny than an ordinary spectator might apply, searching for any hint of golden eyes or pale, unnervingly smooth skin among the pack stands. You won't find him just by looking, Jiraiya said quietly, appearing at his side without any of his usual boisterous fanfare. Orochimaru's always been a master of hiding in plain sight. If he's watching from somewhere either of us would think to check. That's not exactly reassuring, Kakashi said. Wasn't meant to be, Jiraiya said grimly. I've been making some inquiries since Naruto's report. Word from a few contacts suggests Orochimaru's been unusually active lately. More active than his typical pattern of quiet, isolated research would suggest. If he's mobilizing resources specifically around this exam, that's not a good sign for anyone. You think the invasion rumors have merit then, Kakashi said? It wasn't really a question. The rumors of a coordinated strike against Konoha during the exam's final stage had been circulating quietly among the higher ranks for weeks now, ever since intelligence reports began noting unusual troop movements from the hidden sand. I think, Jiraiya said carefully, that Orochimaru rarely does anything without multiple layers of purpose behind it. If he's planning something during these exams, I'd wager real money that Naruto's bloodline factors into it somehow, alongside whatever broader political scheme he's cooking up with the sand. Kakashi's jaw tightened. Then we need to be ready for both. Agreed, Jiraiya said. Which is exactly why I intend to keep a close eye on things from here on out, rather than continuing my usual travels. Someone needs to watch Naruto's back during whatever comes next, and I'd rather it be someone who actually understands what we're dealing with. Down on the arena floor, Sasuke Uchiha faced off against the genin from the hidden sand. Yoro's earlier match against Sasuke had been replaced, in this telling, by a different pairing entirely. The ripple effects of the changed encounter in the forest shifting the bracket in small but meaningful ways. Naruto watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, trying to focus on his teammates' fight rather than the persistent, uneasy feeling crawling along the back of his neck that told him he was being watched from somewhere in the pack stands. You alright? Sakura asked quietly, noticing his distraction. Yeah, Naruto said, forcing his attention back to the arena. Just can't shake the feeling he's here somewhere. Watching. Kakashi-sensei and Jiraiya-sama are keeping an eye out, Sakura said, trying to sound more reassuring than she probably felt herself. Try not to worry about it too much right now. Focus on the exam. Easier said than done, Naruto thought, but he nodded anyway, forcing himself to watch Sasuke's fight unfold with as much genuine attention as he could muster. Sasuke won, of course, his Sharingan tracking his opponent's sand-based techniques with the same relentless precision that had always defined his combat style, ending the match with a decisive taijutsu combination that left his sand opponent unconscious on the arena floor within a few tense minutes. Nice work, Naruto said, as Sasuke rejoined them at the railing, barely winded. Wasn't much of a challenge, Sasuke said, though there was a note of genuine relief beneath his usual composed indifference. Unlike whatever's apparently still hunting you from the shadows. Thanks for the reminder, Naruto muttered. The remaining matches proceeded through the afternoon. Kiba's lost to Shino in a fight defined by tactical patience over raw aggression, Niji's brutal, philosophically loaded victory over Hinata that left Naruto seething with barely suppressed fury on his cousin's behalf, Choji's grinding, ultimately unsuccessful effort against Dosa Kinuta, one of the same sound genin Naruto had already crossed paths with once before. Through it all, that persistent, uneasy prickle along the back of Naruto's neck never fully faded, the certain, unshakable sense that somewhere in the crowd, patient golden eyes were tracking his every movement, cataloging every flicker of chakra, waiting for whatever moment they'd decided would be optimal to finally make their move. That evening, after the day's matches concluded and the exam participants were dismissed to rest before the final stage's official announcement, Kakashi pulled Naruto aside in a quiet corridor beneath the arena stands. I need to ask you something, Kakashi said, and I need you to answer honestly, not with whatever brave face you've been putting on for your teammates all day. Okay, Naruto said, some of his usual bravado dropping away at the seriousness in Kakashi's tone. How are you actually holding up? Kakashi asked. Not the exam. Not the training. All of it, Orochimaru, the pressure, the knowledge that something might be coming for you specifically. How are you actually doing with all of that? Naruto was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his own hands in that now familiar gesture. Scared, he admitted finally, quietly, in a voice stripped of its usual bluster. Like really scared, sensei. Not of losing a fight. Scared that whatever's coming, I'm not gonna be ready for it. Scared that this power I barely understand is gonna get somebody hurt because of me. Scared that guy's gonna find some way to get his hands on me anyway, no matter how careful I am. That's an honest answer, Kakashi said, something gentle in his voice now. And for what it's worth, Naruto, that fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you paying attention. The genin who worry me are the ones who feel invincible right before something proves them wrong. Doesn't really make the fear feel better though, Naruto said, a small, tired smile touching his mouth despite everything. No, Kakashi agreed. It rarely does. But I want you to know, you're not facing any of this alone. Jiraiya is staying close for the remainder of the exam. Lord Hokage has quietly increased security measures throughout the arena and the surrounding village. And I intend to be within reach at every single stage from here on out, whatever comes next. Thanks, Naruto said quietly. Seriously. I know I probably don't say that enough. You say it plenty, Kakashi said, the ghost of warmth returning to his voice. Now get some rest. Tomorrow, they'll announce the final matchups, and after that, we've got roughly a month before the final stage actually takes place. I intend to use every single day of that month training you as hard and as carefully as we possibly can. The final matchups were announced the following morning to the assembled crowd of surviving genin. Naruto would face Neji Hyuga in the finals, a pairing that sent a fresh spike of grim determination through Naruto's chest the moment he heard it. Memories of Hinata's battered, defeated forms still sharp and painful in his mind. Sasuke's own final match was set against Gaara of the Sand, a name that meant little to Naruto beyond a vague memory of an eerily calm red-headed genin who'd watched the preliminary matches with an unsettling, hollow intensity that had made even Kakashi's expression tighten slightly the one time Naruto had pointed him out. That one, Kakashi had murmured at the time, carries something dangerous inside him too. Be careful around him, Naruto. More careful than you might think necessary just from looking at him. Naruto had filed the warning away without fully understanding it, distracted at the time by his own more immediate concerns. Now, with a month stretching ahead before the final stage, that warning lingered at the edge of his thoughts alongside everything else weighing on him. The month that followed passed in a blur of relentless, carefully structured training, Kakashi and Jiraiya splitting their attention between refining Naruto's control over the Adamantine mode and ensuring his more conventional ninjutsu and taijutsu kept pace with the demands of an actual Chūnin-level opponent like Neji. The chain technique, under weeks of patient, disciplined practice, grew steadily more reliable. Naruto could now summon a single chain almost instantly, hold it steady for the better part of a minute without excessive strain, and on his better days, manage 2 chains simultaneously for shorter, more controlled bursts. You're improving faster than I expected, Jiraiya admitted one afternoon, watching Naruto complete a particularly demanding exercise that required holding a chain steady while simultaneously maintaining a defensive taijutsu stance against Kakashi's probing attacks. Faster, honestly, than most of the old accounts I've read suggested was typical for someone first developing this trait. Is that good or bad? Naruto asked, breathing hard, letting the chain dissolve carefully once the exercise concluded. Genuinely not sure yet, Jiraiya admitted. Could simply mean you have unusually strong natural aptitude for it. Could also mean your particular manifestation of the bloodline runs unusually deep, which would be worth understanding more fully before we push much further. Either way, it means we should probably start thinking seriously about the full mode itself, rather than just the individual chain technique. Naruto's eyes lit up immediately. Wait, seriously? Like, the actual shroud thing? The full transformation? Carefully, Jiraiya said, holding up a warning hand before Naruto's excitement could run too far ahead of itself. And only in a heavily controlled setting, with both Kakashi and myself present the entire time. The full mode, from what the old records suggest, draws far more heavily on your life force than the isolated chain technique does. I want to approach this with extreme caution. Okay, but when? Can we start today? Tomorrow, Kakashi said firmly, cutting off what was clearly about to become an extended negotiation. Today you rest. Fully activating a bloodline mode like this for the first time under controlled conditions isn't something to attempt on tired legs and a distracted mind. Naruto grumbled, but didn't argue further. Some hard-won discipline from the past 2 months finally, genuinely settling into his usual restless impatience. The following day, in the same isolated clearing where this entire journey had begun weeks earlier, Naruto stood facing Kakashi and Jiraiya with a mixture of nervous excitement and genuine apprehension. "All right," Jiraiya said, "all business now," no trace of his usual easy humor. "Same principle as the single chain, but scaled up considerably. Reach for that same protective intention, not force, not desperation, just calm, settled resolve, and this time, let it extend beyond just the chains. Let it cover your whole body." Naruto closed his eyes, breathing slowly, deliberately, reaching for that familiar protective focus that had become almost second nature over the past 2 months of training. He thought of Sasuke and Sakura, of the old man Hokage's quiet, grave concern, of Hinata's battered form after Niji's cruel, precise defeat of her. All the people this power was meant to protect, whether it wanted to admit that purpose or not. Something shifted, deeper and more total than any previous attempt. Dark chakra began pooling around Naruto's body, not erupting in the sudden, explosive burst of the bridge incident, but building slowly, steadily, like water rising in a vessel, coalescing gradually into a hardened shroud that clung close to his skin, dense and metallic in appearance, chains threading through and around the shroud itself in an intricate, almost armor-like pattern. "There it is," Jiraiya breathed, watching with sharp, focused attention. "That's it, kid. That's the mode." Naruto opened his eyes, staring down at his own hands, now encased in something that looked almost like burnished metal, chains threading between his fingers and up along his forearms, the whole shroud humming faintly with contained power. "Whoa," he breathed. "This feels different. Heavier, but also kind of lighter? Like my whole body's stronger somehow." "How do you feel otherwise?" Kakashi asked immediately, watching him with careful, clinical attention. "Any dizziness? Weakness? Anything that feels wrong, beyond simple exertion?" Naruto took stock of himself for a moment. "No, actually. Feels controlled. Solid. Like I could hold this for a while." "Try moving," Jiraiya instructed. "Carefully. Test how the shroud responds to actual physical motion, not just standing still." Naruto took a few careful steps, then a few more confident ones, testing the shroud's flexibility, its weight, the way the chains threading through it shifted and resettled with each movement like a second skin rather than a rigid cage. "This is incredible," he said, genuine wonder cutting through his usual bravado. "I feel like I could take a direct hit from pretty much anything right now and barely notice it." "Don't test that theory today," Kakashi said dryly. "Let's establish a safe duration first, before we start testing its combat applications." They held the experiment carefully, Naruto maintaining the shroud for a full 2 minutes under close observation before Jiraiya instructed him to release it, watching intently for any sign of the severe exhaustion that had followed his uncontrolled activation on the bridge months earlier. The fatigue that followed was real, but manageable, nothing close to the hollowed-out, life-drained feeling from that first uncontrolled burst. "That's real progress," Jiraiya said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Controlled activation, reasonable duration, manageable cost. That's about as good a foundation as I could have hoped for, this early into deliberate training." "Does this mean I could use it in the finals?" Naruto asked immediately, eyes bright with excitement despite his obvious exhaustion. "Absolutely not," Kakashi said immediately, firmly enough that Naruto's face fell slightly. 2 minutes under controlled, non-combat conditions is a very different proposition than sustained use under the pressure and unpredictability of an actual fight. We continue building this foundation carefully, exactly the way we have been. No shortcuts, especially not for something as significant as a public exam final. "Yeah. Okay. Fair," Naruto admitted, some disappointment lingering but no real argument behind it. 2 months ago, he might have pushed back harder. Now, with a clearer understanding of exactly what carelessness with this power could cost him, the caution came more naturally. Word of Naruto's steady, careful progress reached certain ears far sooner than any of them would have liked. In his hidden study, Orochimaru received Kabuto's latest report with a slow, growing smile. "Full mode activation," he murmured, reading over Kabuto's carefully compiled notes on the training sessions his spies had managed to observe from a careful distance. "Controlled, sustained, with manageable cost to the user." faster progress than I anticipated, even accounting for skilled instruction. Should this change our timeline, Lord Orochimaru? Kabuto asked. Orochimaru considered this for a long moment, tapping one long finger against the edge of his desk. No, he said finally. If anything, it confirms my instincts were correct to wait rather than force an early confrontation. Let the boy continue developing his control. Let his instructors believe they're building something safe, something manageable. The more refined and stable this power becomes under their careful guidance, the more valuable a specimen he'll be once I finally claim him for proper study. And the invasion? Kabuto asked. Our arrangement with the hidden sand proceeds as planned? Precisely as planned, Orochimaru confirmed, golden eyes glinting in the dim lamplight. The invasion will provide exactly the chaos and confusion I require to make my move without interference from Konoha's broader defenses. Let the boy enter those finals confident in his growing control. Let him believe, even briefly, that he might finally be safe. He smiled, slow and cold, the expression of a man already 3 steps ahead of everyone around him. Confidence, he murmured, makes for such a satisfying thing to shatter. Back in Konoha, blissfully unaware of the precise calculations being made against him from within Orochimaru's hidden lair, Naruto spent the final weeks before the Chūnin Exam finals in a steady, disciplined rhythm of training, rest, and the ordinary, comforting routines of daily life with his team. He sparred with Sasuke in the evenings, the two of them pushing each other through increasingly demanding taijutsu exchanges that left them both bruised, exhausted, and, in their own quiet, complicated way, closer than they'd ever been before. He shared quiet meals with Sakura, who'd taken to studying medical ninjutsu fundamentals in her spare time, driven by a growing determination to be more useful to her team than she felt she currently was. He trained with Kakashi and Jiraiya, gradually, carefully extending the duration and control of his Adamantine Mode activation, always mindful of the careful balance between genuine progress and reckless overreach. And every night, before sleep finally claimed him, he found himself staring up at his ceiling, turning over the same quiet, persistent worry that had settled into his chest weeks earlier and never fully left. He's still out there. Watching. Waiting. Whatever Orochimaru was planning, whatever role the finals or the increasingly worrying rumors of sand troop movements might play in it, Naruto knew, with the certain, bone-deep instinct of someone who'd already faced this predator once before, that the coming confrontation wasn't a matter of if. It was only a matter of when. The day of the Chūnin Exam finals dawned clear and bright over Konoha, the kind of crisp, cloudless morning that made the whole village feel, for just a little while, like nothing could possibly go wrong. Naruto stood in the contestants' waiting area beneath the arena stands, rolling his shoulders, running through the same mental checklist he'd rehearsed 100 times over the past month. Calm. Controlled. Protective focus, not desperate force. He could feel the familiar cold, patient weight of the Adamantine Mode resting just beneath the surface of his chakra network, steadier now than it had ever been, waiting to be called on if the fight against Neji demanded it. You look nervous, Sasuke said, leaning against the wall beside him, arms crossed. I look focused, Naruto corrected. There's a difference. Sure there is. Despite himself, Naruto grinned. The month of shared training, shared meals, shared exhaustion after brutal sparring sessions had worn something smooth between them, not quite friendship in the way either of them would have called it out loud yet, but something adjacent to it, something sturdier than the rivalry that had defined their first year as teammates. Whatever happens today, Sasuke said, more quietly now, don't do anything stupid out there. Neji's strong, but he's not worth risking what Kakashi and Jiraiya have spent a month building. Wow, was that actual concern? From you? Naruto said, pressing a hand dramatically to his chest. I'm touched, really. Don't make me regret saying it. Above them, the arena had already begun filling with spectators, villagers, visiting dignitaries from allied nations, a full contingent of officials from the hidden sand present for what was, on the surface, simply the culmination of a routine joint exam between allied villages. Nobody in that crowd, save for a very select handful of people who already knew better, had any idea just how routine today was about to fail to be. High in the Hokage's viewing box, Hiruzen Sarutobi sat beside the Kazekage of the hidden sand, exchanging the careful, formal pleasantries expected of two allied village leaders, while beneath the surface of his composed expression, a current of quiet unease ran steady and unbroken. Word had reached him only hours earlier, through careful, quiet channels, increased troop movements along the border, unusual chakra signatures detected near several strategic points around the village, whispers of sound and sand shinobi coordinating in ways that shouldn't have been possible if the two villages' stated alliances were genuine. He'd weighed canceling the finals entirely. In the end, he'd decided against it, canceling now, without solid proof, risk tipping his hand to an enemy who might simply delay their plans rather than abandon them, trading a known, prepared confrontation for an unknown one later. Better the danger I can see coming, he thought grimly, watching the arena fill below, than the one I can't. Beside him, hidden beneath layers of subtle transformation and disguise techniques that fooled even the most attentive eyes in the crowd, sat Orochimaru himself, patient, composed, waiting for the exact moment his carefully laid plans would finally bear fruit. The first match of the finals, Shikamaru's characteristically lazy, tactically brilliant victory by forfeit against Temari of the Sand, passed without incident, the crowd's attention gradually building toward the anticipated main event, Naruto against Neji. When the match was finally called, Naruto stepped out onto the arena floor to a roar of crowd noise that momentarily overwhelmed even his usual boundless confidence. Across from him, Neji Hyuga stood with the same cold, resigned composure that had defined his brutal defeat of Hinata weeks earlier, pale eyes activated, tracking Naruto's every movement with clinical precision. "You should forfeit," Neji said, voice carrying easily across the arena floor. "Fate has already determined the outcome of this match. Struggling against it only prolongs your inevitable defeat." "Yeah, I've heard that whole fate speech before," Naruto said, settling into a ready stance, some of his usual fire burning through the nervous tension of the morning. "Didn't believe it when you said it to Hinata, and I sure don't believe it now." "Then you're a fool," maybe, Naruto said, grinning. "But I'm a fool who's about to prove you wrong." The match that followed was, by any measure, an excellent fight, Neji's precise, devastating gentle fist technique testing every ounce of Naruto's improved control, forcing him to rely on quick clones, careful footwork, and eventually, brief flashes of controlled chain generation to intercept strikes that would otherwise have closed his chakra points entirely. It was a fight Naruto might well have lost, honestly, if events elsewhere in the village hadn't intervened first. Because partway through their exchange, just as Naruto managed to land a solid clone-assisted counterattack that finally cracked through Neji's composed confidence, the sky above the arena shattered. Not literally, of course. But the effect was close enough. A massive, swirling barrier of purple-tinged chakra bloomed upward from four corners surrounding the arena, sealing the entire stadium beneath a dome of shimmering, hostile energy, and in the same instant, smoke bombs erupted throughout the crowd, sand and sound shinobi shedding their disguises to reveal themselves as an invasion force rather than allied spectators. "It's begun," Hiruzen said grimly, rising from his seat as, beside him, the Kazekage's form dissolved into a cloud of pale smoke, revealing not the Sand's true leader at all, but Orochimaru himself, shedding his disguise with theatrical, unhurried confidence. "Hello, Sarutobi-sensei," Orochimaru said, a slow, cold smile spreading across his face. "It's been far too long." Down on the arena floor, chaos erupted in every direction, genin and civilians alike scrambling for cover as sound and sand shinobi poured into the stadium, jonin instructors rushing to intercept threats and shepherd frightened spectators towards safety. "Naruto!" Sasuke's voice cut through the noise as he vaulted down from the stands, kunai already drawn, Sakura close behind him. "What's happening?" Naruto shouted, disengaging from Neji, who himself looked momentarily uncertain, caught between the sudden chaos and his own unresolved match. "Invasion," Sasuke said grimly. "This is the thing Kakashi and Jiraiya were worried about." Above the arena, the barrier sealing the stadium pulsed ominously, and within its confines, Hiruzen and Orochimaru faced off, the two of them beginning a confrontation that would, if history held true even in this altered telling, become a defining, tragic moment for the entire village. But history this time had one more twist still coming, because Orochimaru's plans within that barrier were never really about defeating the third Hokage outright. That confrontation had always been intended as a means to an end, a demonstration of force, a distraction significant enough to occupy the village's most powerful defender while a separate, carefully prepared operation unfolded elsewhere in the case. An operation aimed directly at Naruto. There came a quiet, unfamiliar voice from the shadows at the edge of the arena floor, as 4 sound shinobi in matching cloaks dropped down from the stands, moving with the coordinated, disciplined precision of a squad that had rehearsed this exact moment many times over. "That's our target," confirmed the bloodline signature. One of the 4, a woman with an unerringly sweet smile and long dark hair, extended a hand, chakra sensors flaring faintly along her fingertips as she studied Naruto from across the chaos of the arena floor. "Confirmed," she said. "That's him. Just as Lord Orochimaru described." "Wait, what?" Naruto said, spinning to face the 4 newcomers, dread pooling cold in his stomach. "Who are you guys?" "Special Extraction Unit," the woman said pleasantly, as though discussing something as mundane as delivery logistics rather than an attempted kidnapping. "Lord Orochimaru sends his regards, and his apologies that circumstances require us to be somewhat less patient than he'd originally intended." "You're not taking him anywhere," Sasuke snarled, stepping protectively in front of Naruto, Sharingan blazing. "How touching," one of the other sound shinobi said, a broad, heavy-set man cracking his knuckles with unhurried confidence. "Unfortunately for you, we were given very specific instructions to remove any obstacles standing between us and our objective. Try not to take it personally." The fight that followed erupted with terrifying speed, the 4 sound shinobi moving with practiced, coordinated efficiency, clearly having trained specifically for exactly this kind of extraction operation. Sasuke and Sakura fought back with everything they had, Neji, still technically Naruto's opponent moments earlier, joining the defense with grim, focused determination once the true nature of the threat became clear. But 4 elite, specialized shinobi against 3 genin and 1 still technically mid-match combatant was never going to be an even fight, and within moments, cracks began showing in their defense. Sakura driven to one knee by a vicious combination strike, Neji staggering back from an attack that clipped through his gentle fist defense at an angle he hadn't anticipated, Sasuke bleeding from a shallow cut along his forearm that had come far too close to something more serious. "Enough of this," the sweet smiling woman said, tone still pleasant even as her eyes tracked the fight with clinical, predatory patience. "Subdue the obstacles. Leave the target to me." She moved toward Naruto with sudden, terrifying speed, faster than anything he'd faced since Orochimaru himself in the Forest of Death, and in the split second before her hand closed around his wrist, Naruto felt something inside him snap into place with cold, absolute clarity. Sasuke's bleeding. Sakura's down. Neji can barely stand. And if I don't do something right now, all of them are gonna get hurt worse trying to protect me. The Adamantine Mode answered before he'd even fully finished the thought. If this is the moment you've been waiting for, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next is going to be one of the most intense sequences in this entire story. Ring that bell, you don't want to miss this. Dark chakra erupted around Naruto's body in a full, sudden surge, the hardened shroud he'd spent weeks carefully, deliberately building through controlled training snapping into place in an instant, chains threading up along his forearms and across his shoulders in an intricate, armor-like lattice. The woman's hand, already closing around his wrist, met solid, unyielding chakra-hardened resistance, and recoiled instantly, a hiss of genuine pain escaping her lips as the impact numbed her fingers. Interesting, she managed, shaking out her hand, some of her earlier pleasant confidence finally cracking. So the reports were accurate after all. "Get away from my friends," Naruto said, and his voice came out steadier, colder, more controlled than it had any right to be given the chaos surrounding him. He moved before she could respond, chains snapping outward in coordinated strikes that forced her into a full, scrambling retreat, buying enough space and time for Sasuke to drag Sakura back to relative safety and for Neji, breathing hard, to regroup at Naruto's flank. "That's the bloodline," Neji said, eyes narrowing as he studied the shroud with clinical, Byakugan-enhanced focus. "I can see the chakra network shifting, feeding directly into that shroud. Naruto, whatever this is, it's drawing on something far deeper than your ordinary reserves." "Yeah, I know," Naruto said grimly. "Trust me, I know exactly what it's costing me right now. Doesn't mean I'm gonna stop." The heavy-set sound shinobi surged forward next, aiming a bone-crushing punch directly at Naruto's chest that would have shattered ribs on an ordinary target. It struck the hardened shroud instead, and the resulting shockwave sent the attacker himself stumbling backward, cradling a hand that looked distinctly, painfully broken. "What is he?" the man snarled, backing away warily. "Made of." "Focus," the woman snapped, regrouping with her two remaining teammates. "Lord Orochimaru wants him alive and reasonably intact, but he never said anything about the boy's teammates. If we can't take him directly, we neutralize his support first." That was the wrong thing to say within Naruto's earshot. Something in his chest went very cold and very focused, the protective instinct that had always fueled the Adamantine Mode's manifestation sharpening into something harder, more absolute. The chains around his shoulders multiplied, extending outward in a wide, defensive perimeter that placed his unconscious, injured, or exhausted allies firmly behind a wall of hardened, humming chakra. "You're not touching them," he said, voice flat and certain in a way that made even the sweet smiling woman's confidence waver slightly. "Subdue him properly," she ordered her remaining two teammates. "All at once. Don't give him room to coordinate." They came at him from three directions simultaneously, a coordinated, overwhelming assault clearly designed to overload even a defense as formidable as the shroud currently provided. Naruto's chains lashed out to meet each attacker in turn, the fight becoming a blur of clashing chakra and metal-hard chain links, every exchange costing him more of that cold, familiar reserve buried beneath his ordinary chakra network. He was winning. Barely, and at a cost he could feel accumulating with every passing second, a hollow, draining sensation creeping in beneath the shroud's protective strength. But he was winning, driving the three attackers back step by grinding step, buying precious time for Sakura to drag herself upright and begin working through whatever basic medical techniques she'd managed to absorb over the past month, for Sasuke to regroup and rejoin the fight at Naruto's flank, for Neji, breathing hard but stubbornly upright, to add his own considerable gentle fist precision to the growing defense. "This is taking too long," the woman finally snapped, genuine frustration cracking through her earlier composure. "Fall back. Report the failure to Lord Orochimaru directly. We'll need reinforcements, or a different approach entirely." "Wait," Naruto started, chains lashing forward to try to prevent their retreat, but the three sound shinobi were already withdrawing with the same coordinated efficiency they'd arrived with, vanishing into the chaos of the wider battle still raging throughout the sealed arena. Naruto stood there for a long moment, chains still hanging in a defensive perimeter around his exhausted, battered teammates, breathing hard, the cold, hollow drain of the fully activated mode pulling at something deep inside him that felt distinctly, alarmingly different from ordinary chakra exhaustion. "Naruto," Sasuke said, voice tight with concern, "you can let it down now. They're gone." "Yeah," Naruto managed, and released his hold on the mode, the hardened shroud and its chains dissolving into scattered motes of dark chakra that faded into nothing. The moment they vanished, his legs buckled entirely. Sasuke caught him before he hit the ground, easing him down carefully rather than letting him collapse outright, and up close. The sight of his teammate's face made something cold and frightened lodge itself firmly in Sasuke's chest. Naruto's skin had gone pale, almost gray, sweat beading across his forehead despite the cool morning air. His breathing came in shallow, uneven gasps, and when his eyes fluttered, struggling to stay focused, they looked distant and glassy in a way that had nothing to do with ordinary combat fatigue. "Sakura!" Sasuke shouted, though she was already moving, dropping to her knees beside them despite her own injuries, hands already glowing faintly with the basic medical chakra she'd been practicing. "His chakra network feels wrong," she said, voice tight with fear as her hands hovered over Naruto's chest. "Not depleted the normal way. It's like something's been drained from somewhere deeper than the network itself." "That's the mode," Neji said grimly, Byakugan still active, watching the strange, hollow patterns still visible in Naruto's chakra pathways with clinical, worried focus. "Whatever that transformation was, it's still pulling from him even now that he's released it. I've never seen anything like this." "Naruto," Sasuke said, gripping his teammate's shoulder, "Hey? Stay with us." "Come on." "I'm okay," Naruto mumbled, the same tired, stubborn deflection he always reached for, though this time it carried far less conviction than usual. "Just really tired. Worse than before." You held that mode for way longer than you ever have in training, Sasuke said, voice tight with barely controlled fear. You pushed way past whatever limit Kakashi and Jiraiya set for you. Didn't exactly have a choice, Naruto managed, a weak, exhausted attempt at his usual grin flickering across his pale face. Wasn't gonna let them hurt you guys. You idiot, Sasuke said, though there was no real heat behind the word, only raw, unguarded fear finally breaking through his usual composure. You could have. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Kakashi found them minutes later, having fought his way through the chaos of the invasion toward the last location. He'd sensed Naruto's chakra signature flare with alarming, unfamiliar intensity. What he found waiting for him made his blood run cold in a way that years of dangerous missions rarely managed anymore. What happened? He demanded, dropping to his knees beside Naruto's prone, pale form, already running quick, practiced diagnostic hand seals over his student's chest. Extraction squad, Sasuke said quickly. 4 of them, after Naruto specifically. He activated the full mode to protect us, held it way longer than he ever has before. Sakura says his chakra network feels wrong. Like something's being drained from somewhere deeper than usual. Kakashi's expression, already grim, tightened further as his diagnostic technique confirmed exactly what Sakura had already sensed, chakra pathways intact, but something beneath them, something harder to define through conventional medical ninjutsu, showing clear signs of significant, concerning strain. We need Jiraiya, Kakashi said, voice tight. Now. He's fighting near the east wall, Neji reported. I saw him engage several sand shinobi on my way here. Sasuke, go find him. Tell him exactly what happened, and tell him it's urgent. Kakashi's tone left no room for argument. Sakura, keep doing what you're doing. Basic stabilizing chakra, nothing complicated, just keep him steady until Jiraiya arrives. Neji, can you stand watch? More extraction attempts are possible if they regroup. Sasuke was already moving, sprinting off into the chaos without further prompting, while Neji, despite his own considerable injuries, took up a careful defensive position, Byakugan scanning the surrounding chaos for any further threats. Kakashi remained kneeling beside Naruto, one hand resting on his student's shoulder, watching the shallow, uneven rise and fall of his chest with an intensity that betrayed just how frightened he actually was beneath his usual composed exterior. Hang in there, he murmured, quiet enough that only Naruto, drifting in and out of clear consciousness, might have heard it at all. You held on long enough to protect them. Now let us take care of the rest. Jiraiya arrived within minutes, Sasuke close behind him, and the moment the Sanin's eyes fell on Naruto's pale, exhausted form, his expression shifted into something grave and focused at Naruto, in his rare lucid moments, had never quite seen on the old sage's face before. Move aside, Jiraiya said, dropping down beside Kakashi, hands already glowing with a more advanced diagnostic technique than Sakura's basic stabilizing chakra could manage. He studied the results for a long, tense moment, jaw tightening progressively as the full picture became clear. Well? Kakashi asked, though something in his tone suggested he already feared the answer. He held the full mode for roughly 4 minutes under active combat conditions, Jiraiya said grimly. Compare that to our 2-minute controlled test under calm, non-combat circumstances just weeks ago. The strain isn't linear, either. The combat conditions, the emotional intensity of protecting his teammates directly, likely accelerated the drain considerably beyond what raw duration alone would suggest. Is he going to be alright? Sasuke demanded, some of his usual composed reserve completely gone now, raw fear bleeding openly into his voice. Physically, yes, Jiraiya said, some of the tension easing slightly at that at least. His chakra network will recover with rest, same as always. But the deeper strain, the life force cost we warned him about from the very beginning, that's not something that simply heals with a night's sleep. I won't lie to any of you. Today likely cost him more than any of our careful training sessions combined. The words hung heavy in the chaotic air around them, punctuated by the distant sounds of ongoing battles still raging throughout the sealed arena and the wider village beyond its barrier. How much more? Sasuke asked quietly. I don't know precisely, Jiraiya admitted, an honesty that was somehow worse than any vague reassurance could have been. There's no way to measure it exactly, not with the tools currently available to us. What I do know is that we need to be far more careful going forward about when and how he activates this mode, or the cumulative costs could become genuinely dangerous far sooner than any of us want to imagine. Naruto, drifting somewhere at the hazy edge of consciousness, heard fragments of this conversation without fully processing the weight of it. Jiraiya's grave tone, Sasuke's uncharacteristic fear, the distant, muffled sounds of a village under siege all around them. Worth it, he thought hazily, the last clear thought before exhaustion finally, completely claimed him. They're safe. Whatever it costs, worth it. He woke some time later in the relative quiet of a makeshift medical tent, the sounds of battle outside considerably diminished, though not entirely silent. Sunlight slanted weakly through the canvas overhead, suggesting hours, rather than mere minutes, had passed since the fight at the arena. Hey, he croaked, throat dry, finding Sasuke sitting in a chair beside his cot, looking exhausted but otherwise intact. You're awake, Sasuke said, something like genuine relief flickering across his face before his usual composed mask reasserted itself. About time. You've been out for almost 6 hours. 6 hours, Naruto repeated, struggling to sit up despite the deep, bone-weary exhaustion still weighing down every muscle in his body. What happened? The invasion, over, Sasuke said. Mostly. The sand and sound forces retreated once it became clear the invasion wasn't achieving its objectives fast enough to justify the risk. Casualties on our side, but the village held. And the old man? Naruto asked, dread creeping into his exhausted voice. Is he? Sasuke's expression darkened slightly. Alive. Barely. His fight with Orochimaru was bad, from what I've heard. He's recovering, but it was close. Naruto sagged back against the cot, relief and lingering fear tangling together in his exhausted chest. And the extraction squad? The ones that came after me? Retreated, same as the rest, Sasuke said. Kakashi and Jiraiya both think they'll be back eventually, though. Whatever Orochimaru wants with you, he's not the type to just give up after one failed attempt. Yeah, Naruto said quietly, staring up at the canvas ceiling above him. Figured as much. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the day's events settling heavily between them. You scared me today, Sasuke said finally, quietly, not quite meeting Naruto's eyes. Genuinely scared me. I've never seen you look like that. Like you were barely hanging on, right after using that power to protect us. Sorry, Naruto said, and meant it. Don't be sorry, Sasuke said, some old, familiar frustration edging back into his voice. Just be smarter about it next time. If it comes down to a choice between protecting us and protecting yourself, I don't want you making that choice by nearly killing yourself in the process. We're supposed to look out for each other. That includes you looking out for yourself, too. Naruto managed a tired, genuine smile at that. Yeah. Okay. I hear you. You'd better, Sasuke said, though the words carried real warmth beneath their usual gruffness. Now get some more rest. Kakashi wants to talk to you once you're properly recovered, and from the look on his face earlier, it's going to be a serious conversation. That conversation came the following morning, once Naruto had regained enough strength to sit upright without assistance. Kakashi and Jiraiya both settling into chairs beside his cot with matching expressions of grave, careful concern. I won't waste time easing into this, Jiraiya said. What happened yesterday was more dangerous than any of us anticipated this early into your training. You held the full mode for roughly 4 minutes under intense combat pressure, more than double our previous safe threshold, and the cost was significant. I don't yet know exactly how significant, in terms of long-term impact, but it was enough to concern me deeply. I didn't have a choice, Naruto said, though there was none of his usual defensive heat behind the words, only tired, honest acknowledgement. They were going after Sasuke and Sakura. I wasn't gonna just stand there. I understand that, Kakashi said gently. And I want to be clear, Naruto, nobody here is angry with you for protecting your teammates. That instinct is exactly what makes you who you are, and exactly what this bloodline seems to respond to most naturally. But we need a better plan going forward, because yesterday proved this power can demand far more than we've prepared you for, and Orochimaru is not going to simply give up after one failed attempt. So what do we do? Naruto asked. Just hope he doesn't try again. No, Jiraiya said firmly. We use this. There's a place I've been considering taking you for some time now, Naruto, somewhere that might hold real answers about how to control this mode more safely, more efficiently, without the kind of cost you paid yesterday. Naruto's eyes widened. Where? The ruins of Uzumaki itself, Jiraiya said quietly. Your mother's homeland. If there's any surviving record of how the old royal bloodline learned to manage this power without paying so dearly for it, that's the most likely place we'll find it. The weight of that suggestion settled heavily over the small medical tent, a journey to the sunken remains of a nation destroyed for the very power now living inside Naruto's own body, a chance, however uncertain, to finally understand the legacy he'd inherited on his own terms rather than through fragmented archive scrolls and desperate improvisation. Yeah, Naruto said finally, quiet determination steadying his tired voice. Yeah, let's do that. Whatever it takes to make sure yesterday doesn't happen again.